All right. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Destin City Council, September 17, 2018. I'd like to call it to order. And to start our proceedings this evening, we have Pastor Nathan Sell from Destin United Methodist Church. Nathan, would you like to come up and lead us in prayer?
If you would bow with me. Lord, we come to you today asking for your grace and for your blessing to be poured out upon the city. We thank you for the blessings that you've already bestowed upon us. And Lord, we just come to you right now asking that you would bless our leaders with wisdom and discernment in every decision that they make and throughout this meeting and throughout their daily lives. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Take a seat if you can. We're going to go ahead and start out with a special public hearing for fiscal year 2019 millage rate and budget. This is the second reading of Ordinance 1818-CN. Do you want to read that first? Did I catch you off guard?
Yes.
It's your first night, so we'll overlook it.
Bear with me. Ordinance 1818-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, adopting the final levying of ad valorem taxes for the City of Destin for fiscal year 2019 and providing for an effective date.
Do you, we want to entertain public comment first before we have a motion? That suits everyone all right? At this time, if anyone would like to step up to the plate, let me see if we have any blue cards. No, I don't see any on our read ordinance. So if anybody would like to speak on the proposed fiscal year millage rate, seeing none, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make the recommended motion. I move that the council adopt ordinance 18-18-CN on second reading, adopting fiscal year 2019 millage rate of 1.6150 mils, which is more than rollback rate of 1.5520 mils.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Braden and a second by Ms. Ramswell. Is there any discussion here at the dais? Seeing none, let's go ahead and proceed to vote. Vote is unanimous, so moved. We'll move on to item B, the second reading of ordinance 18-19-CN. Ms. Kopp.
Ordinance 1819-CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin, making appropriations for certain expenditures, expenses, capital improvements, and certain indebtedness of the City of Destin, Florida, for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2018, and ending September 30th, 2019, and providing for an effective date.
Ma'am, this is another opportunity for public comment on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019. Nobody's interested in that today, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make that motion. I move the council adopt ordinance 18-19-CN on second reading to provide for a balanced budget for fiscal year 2019.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion, I have a second, and we have a power loss. Nope, just the lights.
Ron. There we go.
Thank you, Ron. Oh, there you go.
That worked for me.
That's our diversionary entertainment for tonight. So we have a motion, we have a second motion. Let's go ahead and proceed to vote. Vote is unanimous, so moved. Our budget is set for 2017. 19.
We want to roll back with
I'm still living in the past. All right, we have a agenda approval. Because we have a large turnout here and we have a pretty good idea which way, does anybody, will you make that?
You think it'd be appropriate to take item under the city attorney, J1, and just move that to the beginning?
Okay, I think what we can do is we'll do that right after our presentation on the regular point, if that pleases the council. I think so. So we're going to move that 7. What is that? Yeah. 7I, right? HI. All right, well, next we have approval of the minutes. Wait. Okay, approve the agenda. That's the only thing we want to go ahead and do that, sir.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve the agenda now as presented. We have a second. Let's take it to vote. Technology is winning so far this morning. So the vote is unanimous. So moved. All right, item 1A, approval of the minutes of September 5th, 2018, regular city council meeting.
I'll make that motion for A and B both.
I have a motion to approve the minutes of both A and B.
Second.
And we have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none? Yes, sir. Mr. Miller, we're just going to approve the minutes. Mr. Chesser, I'm sorry. You can come up and make comments to that effect under item 3, public comments, if that's okay, sir. Please. All right, we have a motion. We have a second.
Mayor, I'm going to go ahead and abstain. I was not a member of the executive session, so I don't feel that I'd be approving minutes for them.
Correct. Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I can make a motion to rescind if you want and do it again.
Do that.
if
Let's
that's
do
the
over.
proper way
Let's
forward.
do it the right way. I don't
Or
want
to
anybody
recall.
crying. No, so noted, Mr. Dixon. You are correct. We'll do it individually. Approval of the minutes. Item 1A, approval of minutes September 5th, 2018, regular city council meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. No further discussion. Let's vote on that. Vote is unanimous, so moved.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes from the council executive session of September the 5th, 2018.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. See no further discussion, we shall vote on that.
Mayor, my abstention still stands.
Yes, sir. 6-0 unanimous, so moved. All right. Item 2, proclamation recognition, special presentation. Today we have a presentation of the 30% plan for the Norrego Point Recreational Improvement. Mr. Pierce Barrett, Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Mr. Barrett. Mayor, you recognize
I'll get it right one day. For the record, my name is Pierce Barrett. I'm with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. I'm the NERDA project manager with the Deepwater Horizon program under the Division of Water Restoration Assistance. I'm here tonight to give you an update on the third phase of the Noriega Point Stabilization and Recreational Improvement Project. First two phases of the three-phase project have been completed. As of last week, the stabilization portion, you may have seen the last barge come in and place some final rock along the stabilization area, the T-groin section. We had some final rock put in, some toe stones were placed, and we had some final smaller stones placed in some voids that were noted after we had the most of the work done that was finished back in June. And at this point, that portion of the work has been completed and certified completed by our engineer, who is also here tonight, Mr. Matt Trammell with Taylor Engineering. As of this week, the vegetation portion of the work, the stabilization of the dunes, as we call it, should be completed as well. You'll have noticed that most of the vegetation that's going on up in the dune portion of the project has been rapidly being completed, and as of tomorrow, the majority of it should be finished, and by the end of this month, it should be completed as such. I hope to be able to have some pictures online soon of that work. You'll be able to see the completion of it. At this point, we're at the 30% design phase. Earlier last month, we presented to the Parks and Recreation Committee this same presentation and received public questions and comments at that time as to these design drawings. Excuse my voice, I'm losing it a little bit. Hopefully I won't lose it completely before I get through. Just to give you a couple of facts on the first phase, though, in case some of you may be interested, this was not presented at the earlier, and this is on the phase one, just so if you're interested. I think the question was brought up sometime earlier. On phase one, we had 36,000 tons of rock placed out there on Noriega Point. We had 136,000 cubic yards of sand dredged, created approximately 7 additional acres. We had 825 linear feet of sheet piling placed along the shoreline, 500 linear feet of return sheet pile, that's return walls placed out there, and overall created an additional 600 linear feet of new shoreline. That does not include the new embayments that were created. We have 2 new embayments that weren't out there before this project started. The project, as it was submitted and approved by the trustees and BP at the time before final settlement, included the stabilization of the shoreline and the park structures that are going in, which includes and I'm sorry I left my glasses at home and I don't know if I can read this, but I'm going to try so I don't misquote myself. A picnic pavilion, which has been revised to now be a more or less viewing structure, handicap accessible, restroom facility, new shower structures, drinking fountain, educational signage, which will be placed along the multi-use trail, which we also term as the boardwalk facility, which will go along the harbor side, new bike racks, additional vehicle parking, which will be in the entrance road into the project, and a new access road into the project, and also additional dune crossover structures, which will go from the harbor side over to the beach side of this project. That's the total project. And all of this together makes this a NERDA project. You take any of these components away and the project no longer qualifies. So with that said, I'll go ahead now and present the project to you at the 30% design stage. At this point, the project doesn't change in the components it has. What we can change is somewhat the orientation of the project, if there's some areas you'd like to have changed as far as how it's oriented to some extent. Now, permitting may also change orientation. However, the Corps and or DEP permitting makes us change certain things. Also, you can have some discussion with the size of the restrooms. We have a certain size in there now. You may wish the restrooms to be larger than they're shown. We're also addressing certain things as providing some area for ATV storage for parks and recreation, and also addressing for the county to have access for their beach. I believe they have a cleanup. They provide cleanup activities and beach, I don't know what you call it, dressing, I guess is the best term. They go out there during the season and dress the beach. So with that said, and I'll try to remember to use the one behind me so you can see this. I'm going to skip ahead. This is what the project basically looks like now, with the exception of these are the new proposed facilities. All of this is now constructed. I hope some of you have had a chance to go out there and see it. You can either see it basically from a boat, or if you've had an opportunity to, the best way to see it is with a boat. It's a long ways to walk at this time. If you've had an opportunity to get one of Lance's crew to take you out there in an ATV, then you can get out there and see it. It'll be much easier to access in the future because there will be a boardwalk that will go completely around the harbor side of the project. And it will be completely ADA accessible. This will be the new entrance into the project, and this is where additional parking will be provided. The new restroom facility is approximately right here, and then the new viewing or ADA accessible, we call it a viewing platform, will be right here. This is what's being retermed from a picnic facility. We've trimmed it down. It's a smaller facility, not to be a large picnic type facility. This is another view of the same. You can see the dune structure as it is now. It's much larger. The old dune stopped approximately right here. The new dune now extends all the way out to the point. And this is the new acreage that we have now. These are the two new embayments. Of course, this is the new armored area at the point. It's opened up the harbor again. These are new growing structures. These old growing structures here have been reestablished. These are just engineering drawings. This is the area that exists out there now. This is the drive where it stops. This is the existing city street. This is the existing cul-de-sac that's there now. The new entrance road will continue through. This is a 100-foot right-of-way that the city has acquired back some time ago from previous property owners of this area right here. This is private property in this area right here. This will require, the project will require that through the development order that the property owner of this property right here will fund this road, access road that will go through here to the Noriega Point city property right here. This is the design of the new access road into the project. This cul-de-sac right now, the plans with the city is to take this old cul-de-sac, add additional parking in the area right here, and then this new cul-de-sac will form the function of this old cul-de-sac that's right here. Stormwater will be, treatment will be provided in this area right here. Basic swale type treatment. These are just details of what the boardwalk structures will look like. This is the structure. It's the boardwalk along the backside. This is the crossover structures that will go across the dune. We'll try to build as many as 3 of these structures across the dune. The budget will limit how many we can build. But the goal is to try to build 3 of them. This is the, I believe, I can't read it back there. Is that the, Matt, can you read it? Restroom. That's the restroom facility. How many facilities do we have in the restroom facility now? For men, okay.
3 for women, 1
A relatively small restroom at this point. There's been some talk as to whether or not it should be enlarged. That's the restroom. It'll have to be somewhat elevated because of the flood requirements out there. It will be ADA accessible. It'll be tucked into the dune, the existing dune structure. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll use this one then. I'm sorry. There will be an entrance gate. This is the gate. It's proposed. That's not a final design of the gate, but when you go into the park, there will be an entrance gate structure in which people will go, walk through once they enter the park. So there'll be an artistic type structure. I've either got dead battery or poor aim. I think that's the end of the slides. Some of the questions that were brought up at the Parks and Recreation Committee, I'll just go through these quickly and how we're addressing those. One of the questions brought up by the public was, will this new project blend into the existing sidewalks, roadways, etc.? Yes, it will. We will make all effort to make sure it's a smooth transition from what's out there into the new project. One of the questions brought up, the existing dumpsters that are sitting there, they're sort of unsightly at the end of the city right away now. Will we address those as possibly removing them or relocating them and possibly use that area for additional parking? Yes, that is being considered. A question was asked about will there be crosswalks or access between the private property on the inlet side and the property on the harbor side that is proposed for a marina. Will there be some access or crosswalks proposed between those two properties? Yes, that would be placed in there. That will be city right-of-way, and that'll have to be taken up between once the developer of that property, once he knows how his development's going to move forward, then we'll know how to put crosswalks in there. But that'll be worked out with the city. Regarding the showers, will we leave the existing showers that are out there? That'll be worked out with the city if that's desired to leave the existing showers that are now at the end of the existing right-of-way. That'll be dependent on whether the city wishes to leave those showers that are there, plus the new showers that'll be placed up there near the new restrooms. So that'll be a decision the city can make. Will golf carts be considered in the parking plan? Yes, they will. Are bike racks considered in the design? Yes, and there will be, as much bike racks as we feel are necessary. Those will be addressed when we come back with 60% design. Whether it's, one set of racks or bikes are really used out there, people will use them. We'll place more bike racks out there. Question was brought up regarding fencing. A presentation was made over a year ago, and that's when we changed the picnic pavilion from a picnic pavilion, which was felt might draw crowds that weren't desired out there on Noriega Point. So we reduced the size of the picnic pavilion down to more of a shade type structure. And the question was, the presentation showed fencing. It was an artist rendition and showed fencing along that area. And one of the things, the project doesn't have fencing in it as a component of the project. And we're not actually proposing fencing on the project because typically condo developments usually put their own fencing in. As you go out there, you see fencing. Every condo has its own style of fencing around its project. I'm not against fencing, and we might have limited fencing if we can afford it at the entrance to the project. But at this time, we do not have and don't have it in the budget to put fencing at the entrance of the project going from the waterfront to the entrance and back. So that's the way we're looking at fencing on the project. So I know we don't have public comment at this point, but I will accept any questions from, of course, the council.
All right, Kyron?
The thing that gets me is the treks. I have about 13 years experience with treks, and in this heat with no shade, you can fry an egg at 9 a.m. There are several other composites out there that don't hold the heat as well as Trex. I would urge y'all to consider looking at those options. I understand, why we probably can't go with 2x6 treated lumber. And eventually it'll weather and get splinters and stuff. But the Trex, it just, and you're going to have a lot of people, a lot of little kids, and a lot of people with bare feet not going to wear their flip-flops, and to me it just doesn't work for an area that doesn't have any shade.
Your point's well taken. Fortunately, there are other composites on the market now, and we do typically bid projects, open it up to other types of composites. Right now, the designers are looking at a cement type of surface for the boardwalk instead of tracks because of that very reason. Of course, it's a budget issue, but that's what the boardwalk is. It's a very sustainable type of material. So we'll be looking at that as well, and it also the temperature type. But I understand what you're talking about. Tracks is a very hot surface, and whether we use it on the crossover structures or not, that's another consideration. They may be traditional lumber for the crossovers.
Ms.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Mayor. So I noted that when you were discussing the road that's crossing through the private parcel, does that road essentially extend from where our current road ends to the northern boundary of that private parcel? And that's
My
the extent
understanding,
of it?
Councilwoman, is that road, the city was deeded a 100-foot right-of-way, and that extends from the end of the city's existing right-of-way to Noriega Point, which of course is city property. And that's my understanding. And David, is that correct?
Yeah. The city, as part of the private development to the south, the undeveloped piece, the city was deeded that 100-foot right-of-way. And also as part of that development, they were going to construct what you see on this plan. They were going to construct the roadway with a cul-de-sac and the parking and sidewalks and lighting. That's actually part of their development order that they have. So yes, and it does begin right where our paved parking lot is. That's where it begins.
So essentially the green part that you have there is 100 feet?
That's correct. It's 100 foot wide.
It's 100-foot width, yes.
So
Okay.
it goes, where that retaining...
Length or width?
Width.
Width.
You know where the retaining wall is out there? Okay, from that retaining wall, southeast 100 feet. That's the width of the right-of-way.
Okay, so when I say length, I'm thinking this way.
That's about 800
width
feet.
Across.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's about 800 feet long.
Did it actually specify the length?
We were actually deeded that property, so we have a legal description.
The entire piece?
Yes.
The 800 by 100?
That's right.
Okay, so then my follow-up question is, I noticed that you said that property owner will fund the road. Has it been funded already by them?
It hasn't been funded by them, but as it's stated in the project description that went out in the public description on this property, I'll read you exactly what the sentence says. The road is to be built by a private property owner as part of the owner's development order. And I'll just tell you this, as a consulting engineer for over 30 years before I went into this program, when you worked with city, and I worked with a lot of city governments in southeast Florida and northwest Florida, when you were going in to do a development, you had two options as a developer. And you guys know this. You're building something, the developer usually was obligated. He either paid the money to build the infrastructure that was needed to support his development, or he built the development in accordance with the local government's requirements. And that's what we're depending on that will happen. Now, we've seen the plans that were originally designed for that development of that infrastructure in front of that piece of property. And they were designed in accordance with the city standards at the time it was designed. And that's what we're depending on to go into this property. So either the developer is going to pay for it, or it would have to be, I guess, built by the city to build the connection into Noriega Point.
So we're essentially relying on the fact that they're going to hold up their word and pay us for this, which at this point would be a reimbursement since we're moving forward. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
That troubles me.
Well,
I hate us putting out the money for something that we haven't been funded for, and yet we should have been funded for. But that's not on you.
Well, no.
The original application to DEP showed that as part of the application.
Right.
So,
I understand that, but we haven't received the money, and they haven't. Have you been in communication with them? Have they expressed the inclination
well, that's
that
one
they're
of the
going
things
to
we're
do it?
looking forward to doing is sitting down with the developer to make sure that they're going to honor their portion of the development, that they're either going to write a check to the city to fund this portion of it, or they're going to build it in a timely fashion in which it'll coincide with this project.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Any further comments? Go ahead. Nope.
You talk.
I'm talking. It's not taxi driver. Yes.
No, I just wanted to state that roadway was part of our original application to the state. And
Okay, and that development order that the private property owner has cannot be utilized or developed until they put a road in, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
It's actually part and parcel of their development order that they're required to construct that roadway. And they've already donated the right-of-way.
Right. Yeah, we already own that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
How old's the development order?
How old is the development order? I believe the original development order was from the late, 2008 originally.
It's still,
So it's
still
feasible
current.
they could, if they waited another 10 years and kept it current, they still want to have to build the road.
But they don't get to build their project either.
Yeah, but they haven't built it for 10 years.
We own the land, so we can build on it anyways.
So if they do not contribute and they're not able for whatever reason, will we be over budget, having to spend the money on our own to build this section of road? And is that not something we should consider?
Would the city be over budget?
If we paid for that out of our own money? I mean, I know this came from the grant funds, and I'm just wondering if that would push us over.
There's not money in the NERDA funding to pay for that section of roadway.
There is or is not?
There is not.
There's not.
There's not.
That's what
that
I'm-
portion, like I just read to you straight out of the description of the project, that roadway was intended to be funded by the private property owner, and/or it would be funded by the city to build that section of roadway.
Thanks.
But, our engineers will figure a cost for that roadway, so you'll know how much that infrastructure would cost.
Can I encourage, I don't know whether it would be you or city staff, to reach out to them like yesterday to find out the status of this?
Yes.
Whomever's appropriate. I'm not sure whether that would be you or
Well, I
our
think
city.
it's appropriate for the city to reach out to the developer to set up, and we're willing to sit down with the developer and, see where they are in the process so that we can move this forward. Because that is an integral part of the project. And it doesn't make, we do need to move forward. And so the city needs to know where they are and are they willing to pony up and let's get the thing moving. I mean, they'll have to have the road. They can't develop their piece of property without the road. That's.
Mr. Braden?
Yeah, I had one. That was one of the concerns I had. I don't feel like we're in business to finance their business. If they, they're responsible for it, they're responsible for it. It's not somebody else pay for it and get reimbursed or take them to court to get reimbursed for it. I had the same concerns about the tracks that Mr. Mahler had, dealing with it for years. Even if you put those the floor joist on 12-inch centers, it's still going to sag on us and look horrible over time. So I'd like to see something else if we could. And Matt, looking at the drawing on that, says the joists are 2x8 by 24 inches. I'm taking that just a typo. 2x8 by 24 feet.
30% plans.
Right. And the swells. The swells. I'm taking that's going to be left as sand. Because it looks like there's grass up there, but
Well, there'll be some what we call. It's hard to use the term. It's actually a patented term, but let's just use it right now. Xeriscape, which is vegetation that doesn't require an irrigation system. There is irrigation plans, and the next set of plans at 60% will show you more detail on the type of vegetation that will be placed in there.
would it be like
It just won't be an open sand swale.
It'll be like maybe sea oats or something of that nature.
Something that is a native vegetation that will survive in there without having to have an irrigation system placed in there.
And what is the reason that the finished floor level on those bathrooms are 5 feet?
That will need to be, like we just said, is 30%. That will need to be enlarged somewhat. You're talking about the
Just the bathrooms, that pavilion, the finished floor level was 5 feet, and that's why we had to have the ramps to make it ADA compliant. I just wondered why it was 5 feet.
It's 5 feet above grade. The idea is to tuck it into the dune. It's actually required to be 14 feet. So it was 5 foot above approximately a 10-foot elevation.
we've got to build that quite high because of flood elevation.
Mr. Dick, are you done?
Yeah, that's,
Are you good?
yeah. Okay, yep, that's all I got, Mayor.
All right, Mr. Dixon.
I was kind of questioning the need for retention ponds anyway. The reason I say is that it's just sand. It's
Yeah,
going to percolate.
well-
You're never going to see water standing there. So I'm just questioning the need for that in the beginning anyway. So I'm sure that you're going to say something about the fact that, or somebody will, that we've got the asphalt there and the runoff from that. But before it ever gets to any water source, it's never going to make it on top of the sand. It's always going to be in the ground. I just don't see the need for to have the retention. But I understand if it's you're building something like that, it's a city thing. We got to have it. But it sure seems like a waste of money to me.
Well, I'll take you with me to the permitting authorities, and I'll let you tell them that too. But it ain't gonna fly. You're gonna have to have some sort of a stormwater attenuation. So,
All right, any other members have any other further questions? Seeing none, thank you so much.
all right, thank you.
We'll see you back at the 60%
We'll see you
plan.
60%.
We want to go ahead and move up to 7I right now and then have the public hearing, okay? All right, so what we've done, we made a change in the order, and we're going to move to item 7I, land use attorney amendment to the vested rights, and then item J1, I wrote it down wrong, Gulf Power franchise discussion and further considerations of options. City attorney.
Okay. So
Sorry.
did you also move up the vested rights? I thought it was, okay. Okay. Okay, so there's not an update other than, there's no update other than to let you know that both Gulf Power and the PSC have been notified that the city has elected to exercise its right to purchase.
Okay. Any comments from the guys? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on into the public comment period. We'll start with our blue cards first. When I call your name, just come up and push the button. You got 3 minutes to speak your piece. You get down to the end of the 3 minutes, I'll politely ask you to wrap up your thoughts as quickly as possible. I think it's Mr. Terrell.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
After the public has spoken, are we going to be able to rediscuss the situation?
If you so choose.
Okay, thank you.
Give everybody time to look over their pickleball sheet. All right, well, we're going to change the order of the day then. Dewey Destin, step right on up.
Thank you, Mayor, for this opportunity to speak. Dewey Destin, 777 Spring Lake Drive. I want to bring you some historical perspective of how we arrived at this point. 32 years ago, I sat in the seats you guys are sitting in. I didn't have any white hair, but we were dealing with our very first, I believe, franchise agreement, and that was with Gulf Power. We were pretty green, but we had the benefit of some pretty good advice. And we understood that we needed to have some kind of leverage to protect the citizens of Destin in their dealings with a monopoly, the power company. So we put some things in the franchise agreement that would give us that leverage. We put in that the city had the right to buy out the utility. We also put in there that the city had the right to buy power wholesale from Gulf Power and sell it back at retail to the citizens. We put those two things in there so that in the event that rates became too high or that we were not getting the service that we thought the citizens of Destin deserved, then we would have the ability to do something about it. That was 30 years ago, and I, at the time hoped I'd be here to see when it came about again, and it looks like I've been lucky enough to do it. But the real issue is you guys are doing the right thing. If you don't preserve your leverage with a monopoly, then you're going to put yourself in a position where they can do anything they want and charge anything they want to the citizens of Destin, and there won't be a thing in the world you can do with it. At the point we're at now, I believe they have said they will not put back in a franchise agreement the buyouts, or if they do put them back in, they will be restricted in such a manner that they're basically useless. I don't know what happened to the ability to buy wholesale and sell it back to the citizens. That may have fallen by the side too. But you guys have really no choice but to go forward with the option, or you're going to lose those leverages and you're going to be at the mercy of a monopoly who does not have the best interests of the citizens at heart. Their job is to make money. Yours is to take care of the folks that live here. I've noticed that the robocalls have started again. That gives you an indication of how they play ball. The group that's making those calls, if they're the same group as last time, I think they called it the Small Business Owners for reasonable rates or something like that, well, try to join that organization. Try to find that organization. It does not exist. This is a group that's been hired by somebody, and we can't even find out who, to try to sway the public and tell them a bunch of things that are not true. Don't let those people do what they attempted to do at the last election, which was to sway your mission to do what's right for your citizens. And I hope that the people in Destin are not gullible enough to listen to that stuff. I like to think they're smarter than that, so stay the course.
Thank you, Mr. Destin. Next up, Lee Moore.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. Lee Moore representing Howard Group. And just want to briefly say, Gulf Power has sold out for $5 billion, and now they're trying to squeeze out the opportunity for the citizens of Destin to improve critically needed infrastructure by watering down the purchase option and the purchase agreement. This is not ethical or acceptable on any level, we feel, and we want to just thank this council for standing up for the rights of this city and protecting its assets, not just today, but for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Next up is Casey Waterhouse.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. In an effort to keep this brief and not be duplicative of what Mr. Destin has already stated, I live here with my family. I'm fortunate enough to live in Destin. I practice law, I have my own firm, and I service people all over Okaloosa County. And in doing so, as an attorney, I negotiate for a living. That's a lot of what I do. And without leverage to negotiate, I'm pretty much engaging in meaningless negotiation because I have no pull in one way or another. And I think this council is doing the right thing and using the leverage that we have, the only leverage that we have against Gulf Power. And so I would just like to thank you for the actions that you're taking. And I think it is, in following the Gulf Power issue, I find that it's the only option that we have to exercise this option, which is in the best interest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, Felix Foret.
Thank you for letting me speak, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm just a working man. I used to work 7 days a week, now I work 6 days a week. I just basically have some questions. First of all, isn't this, since this affects everybody's pocketbook in a very direct and meaningful way, isn't this something that would be put to all the voters of Destin? That's my first question. Second one is, what is the impetus behind this? And then the third is, I'm no fan of utilities, but at the same time, what are the plans or what statistics do you all have to back up a general feeling that such a small venue as Destin would have the economies of scale to realize real savings versus Gulf Power? And in terms of the expertise of generating power, I mean, this is just a question I have. What is the impetus behind this, and what savings would we derive from doing this? Are there any accounting figures or projections that could indicate what the savings to all the citizens of Destin would be? And it just seems like it's, I just don't understand the reasoning behind this. So that's basically I have a question. I have these questions, and the biggest one is this going to be put to the general populace in a vote? And also, is there going to be some kind of documentation of what the projected savings would be over and above what Gulf Power would be charging us. And that's about it.
Appreciate it. Unfortunately, we don't have any of those answers right at this moment, but...
Mayor,
Yeah,
I'm going to
we
have to
do,
interject. We do.
actually.
And actually, when we get into the discussion, Mayor, we're going to answer each of those. I've written down every single one of them, okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Shelton, Darrell Shelton.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. My name's Darrell Shelton, excuse me, and I live at 18 Noriega Road here in Destin. The first thing I want to do is I want to commend the council for the vote that you made last Thursday night. I think it was the right thing. I was concerned with some of the comments that I've been reading on social media, as well as some that came from the dais last Thursday night. I think there's a big misunderstanding about what this would do for our city. I heard comments like it would break the city of Destin. These are not general revenue bonds that we'd be buying this with. These are specific revenue bonds, and they'd be paid back after the operational expense was paid for. And that's what I understood during the workshops that we had. And, you know, I see no downside in moving forward with the vote last Thursday night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shelton. Mr. Tadlock.
Honorable Mayor and Councilors, I'm Guy Tadlock. I live at 502 Noriega. First of all, I'd like to say I agree with the comments by Mr. Destin. He framed that perfectly as to how this clause got in the original agreement. Certainly showed a lot of wisdom with our young city at that period of time. I hate monopolies, and I think just about everybody in this room hates monopolies. But the large investor-owned power companies are, for the most part, modern-day monopolies. Yes, on paper, they're regulated, but you know, they control that too with their lobbyists. They have total control of their destiny with little downside or risk on their part. Now, just briefly, I'm going to say that the previous two cities that I lived in were served by the Southern Company. One was Alabama Power, and of course, here in Destin, Gulf Power. In my opinion, the services were not outstanding. They were adequate. When I lived in East Alabama, the services by the publicly owned utility next to the city that I lived in had lower rates, a lot better service, and they kept their equipment, their service system, they kept it up to date, and there was never an issue. Between the two cities, they enjoyed about anywhere from 10 to 20% less power rates than what we did, and you could not tell the difference in the service. There was one other advantage from the public-owned utility in the city next to the one that I lived in that was served by Alabama Power, is that they offered more competitive rates to industry. As a result, that city was able to attract in a lot more business opportunities than what the city that I lived in. If you look at the city of Destin, we're kind of what's referred to as a gold nugget in the industry. We have roughly 15,000 meters, and of that, you look at the number of meters per mile of power line. We fall into the category called golden nugget. It's very profitable. I don't know what the magic numbers are, but that's the reason why the power company is trying to hold on so fiercely with this highly profitable community that we live in. Those are the profits and those are the benefits that this city could benefit if we go forward. I'd like to add one other thing, that if you look out in the in the audience here and in the community, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what's going on here. Going forward, I really think it would serve the city well as the citizens of Destin to get out of factual information on what's going on. Briefly, I talked to Mr. Wright before the meeting, and he said that's something that could be very easily put together and that he would welcome the opportunity to do that. Thank you for Thursday night, and thank you for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tadlock. Danny Tigner.
Danny Tigner, 13 Noriega, Destin. As most of you know, Gulf Power's parent company is the Southern Company. I worked for Alabama Power and the Southern Company for 36 years as a mechanical engineer. The last 20 years, I was a hydro manager of 4 hydroelectric plants, 17 generating units with 700 megawatts of capacity. As large corporations go, the Southern Company is not a bad company. It provides dependable service to its customers. There is one thing Southern Company holds most sacred, and that's not its customers, that's certainly not its employees, it's its bottom line profit. Profit. It is willing to sacrifice almost anything to keep the money coming in. As some of you know, Destin is a cash cow to its electricity provider. And as Destin's decision makers, you would be very foolish to let that profitable business slip through your fingers. So I applaud you for moving forward to take this lucrative enterprise away from Gulf Power. Thank you.
Gene Carter.
Hi, I'm Jean Carter. I live at 719 Mars Street. I don't know how I feel about this issue, but I had some questions and I just wanted to ask them. I want to know if we put figures together yet, what this is going to cost the city, what it's going to save us and all that, and I think you said we did. And I kind of feel like the citizens should have a vote, maybe put this up for referendum. I don't know if there's time to do that, I don't know what, but I feel like maybe the citizens should be able to vote on this. But one of my big concerns is, what happens in a hurricane? Right now, Gulf Power has all the relationships. We have Alabama Power comes down and helps us and all that. And I live in a really old neighborhood with old infrastructure. We don't get power back for a week. And I'm thinking if we don't have anybody to help us, it might be a month before we get our power back on. And then I want to know, my other question was, will we be kind of like Chelco, where the consumer owns, like we're stockholders and we own the power company, and will we share in that, or will the city of Destin just decide what our rates are going to be and be at the will of basically y'all? So that's my questions.
Thank you, Gene. Apparently we'll have some of those answers for you here in a minute as well. I think we have 2 more comments on this particular issue, and then I think we're going to change gears. Stephen Mitchell.
Good evening. One of my favorite sayings is, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. And boy, is that ever the case at the present time in Destin. As you all know, at the special meeting Thursday, the council voted 5-1 to exercise an option that preserves the city's right to purchase Gulf Power electric plant and other property within the city. By casting that vote, the council did not accept Gulf Power's counteroffer and will continue to move forward with negotiations. Simply put, the council left the door open, and nothing that was done thus far locks the city into any specific course of action, in spite of what is being said. On Saturday the 15th at 11:22 a.m., I received a robocall from 850-347-8911.
The male voice on the recording provided an inaccurate synopsis regarding the actions taken by the Destin City Council at the Thursday, September 13th meeting, and urged me to attend the City Council meeting on Monday the 17th in an attempt to reverse the decision of the Council, and went on to provide incomplete and in some cases false information. On Sunday the 16th at 4:37, I received another robocall from the same number with the same information. Today at 12:30 p.m., I received yet a third robocall with that same information. All three robocalls ended and failed to identify who was responsible or paid for it, and was partially a lie by omission. To continue providing Destin residents with false information or misinformation is truly an act of desperation. The telephone number that the robocall came from is a landline in Tallahassee registered to Dave, no last name, and the carrier is Novo Communications, and they specialize in business accounts. If you Google Novo Communications, there's a plethora of negative information and court actions available for your review. No matter what side of this you are on, everyone is entitled to provide his or her side of the argument, but apparently the PACs and others in Destin have a short memory. Since they failed with the smear campaign in our last election, one would think they would have learned a lesson. And the only difference with these robocalls was the source of the fund and sponsorship was not provided. Earlier today, I spoke with the Department of Agriculture and have filed an official complaint regarding the robocalls. And finally, as I stated earlier, the council left the door open, and nothing that was done thus far locks the city into any specific course of action. And I applaud the council for your actions last Thursday. Finally, if anybody's interested, this afternoon I was able to get a recording of that robocall, so if it's of interest to anybody, I have the whole robocall, and I'd play it if you desire. Thank you.
Diane Van Deverne? Van Deverne? Van Overen. It's not a D, it's an O.
Didn't intend to speak, but I just wanted to issue the feeling that I and two other people have is if we can possibly extend the contract the 1 to 2 years, which was an offer by Gulf Power, this will give us time to see the dust settle on their being purchased by Next Era, and that might change a lot of these things. And that was just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, Mr. Chesser.
I appreciate the invitation, but I did not come to talk about that. Thank you.
This is your opportunity to speak about any
yeah,
subject.
We're through the blue cards. This is just public opportunity, and I think you said minutes of last meeting, so you're up next, and then Mr. Mitchell's going to come back up and talk about something else. That doesn't mean anyone else can't step up and talk about the power situation or any other subject. We're just through the designated subject cards.
If I may, then, I am Mike Chesser. You all know that several years ago, there was a lawsuit filed by a local business, BI, against the city to declare its rights to the easements that they said exist on city property. You're all also aware that I asked the court for permission to intervene in that action, and the court granted that permission. What you may not know is that I have been distantly aware that there have been efforts to resolve that, to settle all that, that have been made privately by somebody for the city and the plaintiff in that action. And I've tried very hard to invite myself into that discussion, saying that the court has permitted me to intervene in the action, and as such, I'd like to know what's going on. At 5:05 on the 5th of September, when you all met at 5 o'clock, I got a copy of a multi-page, 8 or 9 or 10-page settlement agreement that was being considered by the city. I got it traveling in the car on my telephone and had no opportunity to read it then. I read it in another day or so. I am now aware that you all had seen it. Whether you had seen it before that or not, I have no idea. And of course, you all know that it was considered in executive session, which means it was considered in an absolutely private, secret presentation as a result of whatever communications you had had at that point. I know that you came back into this room and approved the settlement, approved it apparently privately, came back into the room and without any further discussion here about the contents of that agreement, then approved whatever was done in the executive session. I assume by the motion that's made tonight and approving the minutes, the effort is to bless that which you have all done confidentially. And my effort this evening is to say to you that it seemed only fair for me to say to you that those are discussions that are terribly significant for this city, in my opinion, exactly as you would not discuss Gulf Power and any of the other very significant issues in private and never discuss them publicly. That settlement agreement and the motions and activities that it contained waived completely, and I tell you, you all know what it did. It waived your right to have anything to do with the land planning decisions to be made on those properties forever, which seems to me to be something that I wasn't quite sure each one of you would have understood at that point. Again, my purpose here tonight is to say it seemed only fair that I come here and say, I don't know just why this machine is running quite so quickly. It seems to me as if with those significant issues, it ought to slow just a bit, enough for the public to know what was going into that agreement, for you all to know well what's gone into that agreement and what it was based upon. That having been said, I really believe that the only fair way to proceed is to consider those issues publicly, discuss them publicly, and hopefully come to some conclusion. I would contend differently than's in that agreement, but I admit that there are people who feel differently.
Thank you, Mr. Chesser.
Could I respond?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
And I don't want to engage in a back and forth and protracted discussion about pending litigation, but I will say a couple of things. One is that I did provide the agreement to you. I personally provided the agreement to you a couple of weeks before the executive session, although you've indicated you didn't see it in that vast pile of documents.
I don't think so. I understand that you do. I never got that. I did get one at 5:05.
We've also spoken about it a couple of times on the phone. I also produced the document, which is a public record, to anybody that has requested it. You're not the only person that requested it. And with respect to the executive session, it is appropriate for the City Council to discuss pending litigation at an executive session. At the end and the conclusion of the litigation, as you know, but for the benefit of the audience, the transcripts for the executive session will be made available to the public, so every word that was said will be in the public.
Right. After the court signs an order approving a stipulation that was agreed to in private, and it is my opinion that that disserves everyone. Yes, you did send it to me at 5:05, and at 5:05, again, I was driving in the car looking at a telephone without the ability to read that agreement.
Again,
I don't know who else read it or whether anybody read it.
Thank you. I respectfully disagree. It's a public record for anyone to see.
Thank you, Mr. Chesser.
Mayor.
Thank you, Kim.
Hey, Mayor. I'd just like to say that we did not agree in private during that executive session how we were going to vote.
It's also correct. The vote was made in the public, and the agreement was discussed in the public.
But
yeah, true. The vote was made in public on a private discussion.
You've said twice or three times that it was made, agreed to in a private setting, and it was not agreed to in a private setting. We spoke about it, and then we came in here and someone made a motion that was seconded, and then it was voted on. There was never anything decided in private.
Right. For those who believe that, in my opinion, what was couched as a Burt Harris Act was really an effort to discuss some very serious things in private that never should have been in private, and under the Burt Harris Act, there are no private discussions. You don't waive the city's comprehensive plans in private discussions, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, when the judge finally signs off on our litigation, then it will be public for all to see, correct?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
By that logic, Mayor, I did push my button, but by that logic, every lawsuit that we're in should be discussed up here publicly. Am I right there?
I can answer that if you like. Certainly, the details of the settlement should be discussed in public. That's true.
Well, there's some very tender stuff out there. You know that. And so basically, we pick and choose which one of those we do. And so, in other words, I think what we did was completely legal. And I think what we did was completely right under the fact that we are being sued.
Okay, Tuffy, this is not the place for that back and forth. This is time for public comment. You can ask questions.
Point of order, Mayor. I would like Mr. Dixon to finish.
If it's bothering people,
No, this is just not the place and time. We have other people. This is a public hearing.
he can say what he wants to, but we can't say what we feel like.
Not at this point. Not at this
Your
juncture.
bias is showing, Mayor.
We're going to nip it in the bud, plain and simple.
Thank you, sir. I've been nipped in the bud. Is that it?
Next up, Mr. Mitchell.
Mayor and council, this is a positive statement. Doesn't happen that often. A lot of times people complain, but I'm here to say a big thank you. Mayor, you know, you and I had a conversation, but I sent an email. A month ago, I stood before you as the chairman of the Public Works Public Safety and discussed the raised pavement markers along Scenic 98. And the city staff fast-tracked that after you approved it, and it's been installed, and I just want to say a gigantic thank you. If you haven't had the opportunity to go along Scenic 98, you go out there. It's a tremendous safety thing, and a lot of times people complain about the city staff, but I want to take my hat off and say thank you to them. They did a superb job. It was fast-tracked, and I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. It looks great, too, by the way. I went back after we talked and saw it in the daytime and the nighttime. That was a job well done. Mr. John Madden.
There we go. The last council meeting, you had a presentation by Mr. Duranian, Pedestrian Safety Management Solutions. You all remember all that? I'm here, I represent Pompano Street, about 6 or 7 people, and we have a lot of problems with that. I think you've received several emails, and without further discussion, I'd like to see if we could have another meeting with the public safety and let us give us our opinion of it. That's pretty much, if you could, I think you all voted to spend $5,000 to buy 27 beach access signs. If we could just put that on hold and let us talk.
What is what is the biggest beef with the folks that you represent? Is it the size of the signs or location signs, or maybe both?
The signs, we don't care. I mean, whatever size you want. 27 signs, I don't think you need them. Scenic 98, I mean, traffic's slow there. You got every other street has a crosswalk, a stop sign or something. I haven't heard of any accidents there. I think 10, 15 years ago, a car hit a girl. But I've not heard of anything. My neighbors, I don't know if you could maybe have the police check, but Scenic 98 does not move that fast in the summer. His problem was, essentially the big problem, he directed all the traffic from the villages. He didn't mention there's another subdivision, Emerald Breeze, that dumps in there too. My mother owns a house on Cobia, so I'm familiar with it. I live on the next street, Pompano. He directed it all to Pompano. He put those signs up illegally when he said he did a test, and the vehicular traffic just increased tremendously. So if you go through this, we're going to want a stop sign, four-way stop, some other things to slow the traffic down on Pompano. On Cobia, there's a crosswalk from the villages. It goes down Cobia, it's the same as Pompano. At the end of Cobia, you get a 10-foot wide sidewalk going both ways to the next block where there's a beach access, left or right. If they come down Pompano, it's just one beach access. So I have no idea, other than that he lives on Cobia, why he is directing the traffic. I'll let you make your own. So essentially, we don't want to, I mean, it's okay. We talk to the people, and the visitors, the tourists. That's just the way it is. We get along with people, no problem. But
Go ahead, Mr. Destin.
Mr. Johnson, will you make sure that John gets an opportunity to get before the Public Safety Commission so he can have his time before that committee, and we can air out some of those grievances and perhaps find something that's a little more amenable to you guys to where we can find a middle ground?
We've got a list.
I'd be happy to do that. I have a question for the council. There was a motion made at the last meeting directing staff to move forward. I would have to ask Mr. Bailey for the exact wording. Is it necessary for us to rescind that?
My feeling is, I haven't discussed that specifically with the council, but I would entertain a motion for abatement if that's where you would feel it, because apparently not all of Crystal Beach is in unified agreement. If we held the expenditure of the funds in abatement until... Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, but I'll ask my fellow council members what they want to do, because the real question is, do we want to continue proceeding on the proper course rather than allowing this gentleman to give his presentation?
And what I told Mr. Destin, council members, is that we'll take this, when we get done with the public comment period, that if he would like to entertain that, we'll do it at that time, if that suits everyone. Okay? All right, thank you, sir. Appreciate it very much.
One other point. I'm uninformed about the Gulf Power. I watched your meeting, and I think the biggest thing is education. I agree with you all. Y'all did a great job Thursday. Keep going.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And Colin. Oh, I got another blue card. Colin Terrell. Well, I didn't see Scott's up here. But I'll give opportunity for more folks to come up. So.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Colin Terrell. I live at 98 Cayman Cove. In addition to being a Destin resident, I'm a volunteer Destin ambassador for the USA Pickleball Association. We're asking for your consideration of using the footprint at Buck Destin Park for 4 dedicated pickleball courts instead of shared courts at that facility. We're in dire need of facilities in Destin. During snowbird season, we sometimes have 100 people show up at the Destin Life Center and another 60 show up at the Destin Community Center just to play pickleball. There's just not enough facilities for us. For 5 years in a row, pickleball has been the fastest growing sport in the world. It's now played by about 18 million people. We teach approximately 200 brand new beginners to play pickleball each year, and almost everybody can play the sport, as evidence that we taught Skip to play. Anybody can play. So we'd appreciate your consideration. Destin's a little behind the curve. If you look at the last page of the little handout I gave you, Opelika is opening a new facility next month, which will have 18 outdoor courts completely covered by pavilion. They're spending about $500,000 on it. In addition, the city of Panama City Beach has been in contact with me as the ambassador. They're using $5.2 million of their BP oil spill money for a rec facility. They're going to have 24 indoor pickleball courts and 12 outdoor courts. They are trying to designate themselves as a pickleball destination. I think Destin's got a great opportunity. It's a great sport that can be played by everybody from ages 10 to 80, which is what we have playing in Destin at this time. And I'd really appreciate your consideration for letting us put 4 dedicated courts on the same footprint at Buck Destin. I do not believe it'll cost a penny more than what's already been allocated. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks, sir. Any comments, questions on that one? Go ahead.
Sir, I'm not sure if you're aware. I didn't see where you went. But at the last council meeting, we actually did vote to approve turning one of the tennis courts into a pickleball court and then developing a brand new pickleball court. And I'm not sure we have decided location at this point, but that was approved in the last budget meeting that we had.
One tennis court can accommodate 2 pickleball courts if they're turned to the side. And I'd love to see you do that for at least one of the courts, hopefully for both. That would put us 4 courts out.
Okay. For the record, I'm not sure if y'all caught that. He was suggesting that one tennis court can accommodate 2 pickleball courts if you turn it. Is that correct? And for us to look into doing that, to create 4, is that what you were saying? Okay, certainly something we can look at and discuss. Thank you.
I found you, Mr. Fisher. You were stuck, Mr. Tigner.
I've had the same problem before, I understand. I'm going to take you back to Gulf Power for a few seconds. As the City of Destin considers the right to purchase an electric utility distribution system, that's asking you to face one of the toughest decisions I think any group of volunteers will ever be asked to face with any organization. Basically, I believe this council is primarily made up of our neighbors. They have as much love for the city as anyone, and I respect your ability to wade through this problem and come up with an answer that would be suitable. The problem is many of you spent 3 years looking at this. There's a ton of research. You've hired a research company that appraised the Destin assets at $70 million. It's been a long road, and you're not even halfway down it. To ask the citizens to vote on it is asking the folks that will receive the same kind of trash we got in the mail over the last several years. In a representative form of government, these are the type of questions that the representatives are stuck with. And I don't think you can push it off to the public. It's an easy way to do it, but it can be done. As you all are aware, from a bill payer's perspective, which is the only perspective I have now, is Florida Power and Light customers buy electricity for their homes for $99.37 for 1,000 kilowatt hours. We pay a monthly residential bill of 1,000 kilowatt hours here in Destin. Our bill is $131.28. In an area that is very dense in population, restrained, low cost, great profitability for the power companies, we pay 32% more for our power than many of the cities in Central Florida do. All of the Florida Power and Light customers, which is the largest electric utility in the state of Florida. They claim on their website they're the largest in the world, but I'm not sure about that. But anyway, you've gone to a great deal of work. You've hired professional companies to come in and appraise what you think the value of it and the cost to the city might be or should be, and that was $70 million. Gulf Power just Gulf Power and Florida Power and Light just really appraised the ongoing business, which is a very different thing, at over $200 million. That's what they're paying for it. Destin's users, 15,500 users, represent about 3.4% of Gulf Power's customer base. The deal at $6.48 billion is where I get those numbers from. It's real simple. Divide the numbers into the cost. They're willing to sell it for $210 million, but they think you're fools for wanting to buy it for $70 million. There's a tremendous margin in there. The ability to resell this valuable asset, if nothing else, if you don't want to operate it, you don't have anything to do with it, it's available for resale. It's worth exploring, even if I'm dead wrong. But these numbers are pretty straight out of the studies. You all have heard these numbers. Most of the public has never heard them. You've had 3 or 4 workshops. You've invited the public over and over again. But as you can see, of the 15,500 customers, you're going to get one. If you get 200 out, you've done a big job. So you're going to ask the 15,300 that have never attended a meeting, have never really got into this, to vote. Good try, but not too sure that is effective.
Can you wrap up your thoughts there, Mr. Fisher?
Okay, I'd like to read a quote to you.
Go ahead.
I'm sure the Destin citizens were not happy to see that Nextra, both Nextra and Southern stock, moved 1.5% higher the day this was announced. both companies are going to be making a profit on this. NextEra said they're going to make money the first day they turn the power on and take it over. Equally as important as my comments about the slanderous material that's been sent out and the pressure you're going to be under and don't think you won't get it again. But equally as important, the Alliance for Clean Energy, Susan Glickman, who hits the Florida version of it, and I quote her, "Monopolies go about achieving their ambitions through lobbying and political spending. We've seen them time and time again use heavy-handed tactics to get their way." She continued, FPL spokesman Sarah Gatewood stressed that it is NextEra, not Florida Power and Light, which is purchasing Gulf Power. She said FPL and Gulf Power would remain distinct entities owned by the same parent company. Gulf Power will continue to serve its customers across Northwest Florida as it does today. From a bill-paying perspective, it appears FPL customers will continue buying electricity from FPL at a monthly rate of $99.37. Gulf Power customers will continue buying from Gulf Power, where a monthly residential bill will be the same, $131.38, 32% greater.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Bill Reddington. I hope I said that right, Bill.
Good evening. My name is Bill Reddington. I live at 722 Vintage Circle, Destin, Florida. My biggest concern through all this is what we've been seeing on the television for the last few days over on the East Coast, okay? If you all manage to get a hold to the electric company, what's going to happen when the big blow happens here? Not really a question of if, really a question of when. The one thing I noticed on the last almost storm that came this way is I was driving home one day, there was 4 trucks from a separate power company out of state waiting in case that storm turned into a real storm, waiting to help the repair. My understanding is that if you are a city-owned entity that has that, you don't have access to all those people to come down and help you, okay? Well, I mean, that's what the power companies told me, and that could be wrong, okay?
You got to trust the source, Bill. I'm sorry.
I get it. I get it.
Mr. Destin isn't arguing with a former attorney, sir. You stand corrected, Mr. Destin. You need to be quiet.
It's okay if you want to comment to me, but...
Bill, we're good friends. Go ahead.
Yeah. The reality is that's what my concern is, okay? The other concern I have is if we use the figures that the last gentleman came up with, I mean, I've been getting the robocalls too, let's be real, $200 million and blah, blah, blah nonsense. Okay, well, if you divide that by the number of people that live here, it's going to cost every person in this town $13,000 plus to make the switch, okay? Now, if you go with this gentleman's figures, okay, where the value to purchase is $70 million, it's still going to cost every individual in this town about $4,000 to do that. How do you catch up on your electric bill when you got a $4,000 bill outstanding that has to be covered by the bill? That's another question.
And when we get to general discussion, I will be more than happy to answer that for you.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my real concern with this. Who operates it? I don't think y'all have the infrastructure here to handle it. Maybe when that comes to fruition, that will change. Okay, this is still a small town. We compare South Florida rates. Okay, well, how many million people are down there? I hate to say it, that if 1 million people walk in the door, they're going to get a better price than 15,000. Sorry to report. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
And personally, I also think that it should be voted on by the people.
Thank you, sir. That's all the cards I have. Does anyone else would like to step up to the podium and share their thoughts? It doesn't have to be about power. It can be any subject that is important to you at this time. Seeing none, 7:30. It is time for our annual 5-minute break. take their seats. Cool. I'll give you a buzz. I'll call you so you ain't trying to find me. All right? All right. Right. I'll give you a buzz. Could everyone please take their seats? Could everybody slowly make their way?
So basically what we did was just a simple legal operation preserving our right.
No, he understands. All right, guys. Could everyone have a seat, please? I think we're done with our public comments. When do you want to bring up your little deal?
Would it come up now?
Yes. Well, no, we're going to city manager's report. So.
Well, wait. Members of the public are still here to discuss it.
Right. 7I, and I think.
Yeah, and Skip has some opinions, so let's.
All right.
Open the issue to discussion, and we can close it.
I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. Now, council, we moved up this item on the Gulf Power from 7J1, so we could hear from the public. And I guess there's a couple of you that like to talk or at least discuss a little bit about that. I'll go with Mr. Marler. You may. Okay. Skip. Mr. Oberdeer.
I kind of want to hear what Parker has to say before I get to
Sure. I mean, that's okay. So I've been the. That's good. So there's a lot of new faces in here, and there's a lot of folks that this is the brand new issue to them. So I'll do my best without knocking everybody out with the real 30,000-foot in-depth analysis. But basically, the reason we are here is because 30 years ago, the city of Destin signed a franchise agreement with Gulf Power. What a franchise agreement is the right and privilege for any utility to come into the city of Destin and be the exclusive provider of whatever that utility is. In exchange for that privilege, they have to offer us certain conditional items. There are things called franchise fees that are paid. So if you pull out your bill, you'll see franchise fees that are paid on the bill, which is remitted to the city. I believe we collect about go ahead.
1.7 million a year.
Okay, under the current arrangement. So, to give you an update of where we've gotten from there, it was signed in 1986 with Gulf Power. It included a purchase provision that said after 1996, at any time thereafter until 2016, the city, if it so wanted to, could purchase the system if it thought it wise to do so. The reason, as I'll defer to my father, was the reason you put that in there is because at the end of the day, if you want to actually be able to push back on a massive monopoly, you have to actually be able to say, I can leave. And the only way you can practically say you can leave is through a purchase provision that includes what's called arbitration. Arbitration is the legal procedure that allows the city to go with Gulf Power hand in hand in front of a panel of judges, and they quickly and very low cost, from a low cost standpoint, determine what the value of the system is going to be. If you do not have that system, that procedure enshrined in your contract, that franchise agreement, you have to use what's called eminent domain. I think a lot of you guys know what that is, but basically you have an unwillful seller and you have to, as the government, claw it away from them, and you have to give them just compensation under the Fifth, I believe the Fifth Amendment to the Constitution. That process is insanely expensive. If you wanted to get a $100 million piece of a system, the fact that you have to pay under eminent domain law the other side's attorney's fees, their costs, their expert witnesses, you take a $100 million asset and you could triple it. It makes it impossible from a feasible standpoint to pay that amount using eminent domain, which means if eminent domain is, if you don't have a purchase provision as a city, it means you're stuck with your, once you sign that agreement with that power company or that water company or that gas company, you are stuck with them forever, because you will never be able to afford to purchase the system back from them using eminent domain. That's why it's so important. With our system being worth roughly $70 million, that purchase provision is literally gold. Now, I have been, for the last 6 months, negotiating and recently taking information on how we can get into a new franchise agreement with Gulf Power. I literally went to Gulf Power and said, let's do the exact same agreement we've had for the last 30 years. The answer is no. The reason the answer is no is because they do not want us to continue to have that purchase provision. They said it was a legacy. I said, well, that's a legacy problem for you, not for me. I'm not giving it up. It's the only guarantee that you and your bosses will treat the city of Destin fairly in the future, and frankly, for my children and my grandchildren. So it's imperative that we preserve it. We negotiated over the last several weeks in depth, and where we left it was a agreement that was going to be a 15-year agreement with a 5-year purchase provision that would, it would be a purchase provision that we would be allowed to exercise at year 5, and then after, at any point at the end of year 15. I'm sorry to say they changed the deal with a last-minute switch that basically changed it to where we'd only have one opportunity to exercise it in year 5, and if we don't exercise it, we lose it, and we get one more opportunity to use it in year 15. The problem even further is that the actual the actual purchase provision has been limited in scope, where they've basically they've neutered the ability to actually purchase the asset. They took the substations away from us, and what I got to do very quickly is explain to you what it is we would ever purchase, and frankly, that's a distribution system. You have generation, you have transmission from the generation station, and then it goes to a substation like on Main Street, and then it's from the substation down is the distribution system. If you ever want to be able to operate power, you have to have the substations. Well, they snuck in language at the very last moment, taking the substations away from us. So what is exactly, if we ever exercised our purchase, would we actually be buying? We would be buying a giant albatross that we could never do anything with, because immediately we would have to go buy brand new substations on land we didn't have in a network that's already built out. So believe me when I tell you, they have not negotiated in good faith, and frankly they took a gamble that at the last 11th hour that they were going to put a bunch of changes in on me and that I would capitulate and say okay. And the answer is we didn't. And on Thursday night we exercised our right to purchase, which is a legal operation that preserves our right indefinitely to potentially purchase if we so desire at some future point. The point is we're continuing on a parallel path to negotiate with Gulf Power, attempting to continue to get us in a good franchise agreement. So at the end of the day, we haven't purchased anything, but we have preserved our right to do so. I apologize for long-windedness. I'll yield the floor, and I promise you, I know Ms. Vanover and a couple other folks had some very specific questions, and I will circle back around, and I'll make sure, I've written most of them down, and I'll make sure I answer them, okay? But I want to let the rest of the council have an opportunity to speak, because I think I've sucked the oxygen out of the room.
We'll give everyone 2 shots at it, too, so you got another round, sir. Next will be Ms. Ramswell. No, I'm sorry, first, Mr. Marler.
Thank you. Well, since I was the lone dissenter, I'm going to try to make this real blunt and quick. In the resolution, number 8, it quotes, "The city manager, with the assistance of the city franchise council, Robert Sheff Wright, and the city attorney shall take whatever steps are necessary to commence the process for the city to purchase the electrical plant and other properties within the limits of the franchise necessary to use under or in connection with the franchise, hereby granting such a part of such property." Sorry, my computer started to go. "As the grantor may desire the purchase, as the value be fixed in accordance with the provisions of Section 108.16 Florida Statutes 1985, as it may be amended from time to time." Basically, this council has purchased Gulf Power's assets.
Kyron, I don't want to cut you off. That's not accurate.
Well,
and I can tell you, for a bunch of legal reasons why. But
I understand what you said earlier, but with what I asked Kim, and basically that's what she was saying.
Not exactly.
Well, not exactly, but what I'm trying to get across to you is that I made a phone call to the representative of Gulf Power, and pretty much they're done with us. We're not negotiating. At least this doesn't say we're negotiating anything. I don't see anything in there that shows negotiation. It shows we just purchased the power plant. So I'm still in opposition because I think, as I have already made my known, that this should be a complete citizens vote. This should not be the 7 people up here do not need to make this decision. This should be a citywide referendum vote, which is why I'm in favor of extending it out. But you know, if I'm outvoted, which I've already been, I can't change anything unless some other members of the council do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marler. Next, Ms. Ramswell.
Didn't Mr. Overdeer want to go next? I mean, I'm happy to go. I just didn't want to bypass.
Sure. I was just going by the little yellow list I had. He was on it, but he was on it after Mr. Braden, and I just hit the wrong button. Could you clear me back up, Ray? Thank you, sir.
So I did want to address the questions that folks had, like Mr. Destin said. We do want to address all of your questions tonight, and I think Mr. Sheff is the perfect person to do it. There you are. And then I also wanted to see if I could get you, I mean, I'm happy to play the recording that I got on my phone, but I think almost everybody's probably gotten one of those calls. And if not, the main point of the call, it says that this is going to cost you, the taxpayers, $200 million. Your power bills are going to increase. Property and sales tax are going to jump. Reliability and service are dropping. And hurricane response will suffer. And so if I could, Chef, would you mind just addressing those points, please, so the public can understand how false those are?
Quick humor, as a lawyer, I'm going to say I object to the form of the question, compound. Can I take them one at a time, please?
Yes. So the first point the robocalls say is that this is going to cost you, the taxpayers, $200 million.
Sitting here tonight, we have not even started the arbitration process. The arbitration panel the process would involve appointment of an arbitration panel. We would appoint one, Gulf would appoint one, those two would elect a third. We'd go through the arbitration process. At the conclusion of that process, we'd know what the price would be. Mr. Fisher has suggested that it could be as much as $200 million, depending on how it parses out. as a result of the, relative to the payment, rough estimated payment for Gulf, for Gulf as part of the package deal of what was bought, what is scheduled to be bought, and part of which has been bought by NextEra Energy. They've closed on Florida City Gas. I don't know if they've closed on the 2 merchant power plants or not. The Gulf Power closing is scheduled for something like next May or June.
But simply put...
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're getting what we call at my house the chef answer, but I feel it's important. The previous answer you had from folks with 80 years of experience between them who were involved in the Winter Park acquisition, who ran the Winter Park system for the first 10 years after it was acquired, was $71 million, including all startup costs. I don't know what the arbitration panel will do. Somewhere between 70 million and 200 million is probably a pretty good guess. I don't know. They will be charged to set the fair market value. There will be additional costs to actually start it up to be incurred by the city. Now, beyond that, you know, the question is, you know, does anybody buy their house outright for cash? Generally not. The debt service to purchase whatever you buy will be rolled into the rates. The estimates prepared by Bill Harrington and Jerry Warren, who were involved in the Winter Park acquisition. Jerry ran it for 10 years after formerly having run Gainesville Regional Utilities years ago. You know, the estimates that they prepared indicated that you could charge Gulf Power's rates, which you don't have to do. You could lower them if you wanted to. But if the city acquired it, charged Gulf Power's rates, paid all the debt service, replaced the franchise fees, and all the other estimated costs, it would still throw off $6.8, $6.97 million a year in cash over and above the debt service payment. Now, that depends on that number being right. It depends on their assumptions being right. You know, I know there was some murmurings of distrust about their numbers, you know, and I would encourage you to hire somebody else to do another study and vet this. You know, this is a 9 figures. This is a major 9 figures decision for y'all. You can spend, you know, a few tens of thousands of dollars to vet it to whatever degree you want to vet it.
But like the man said, and when I hear this, my first thought would be, it's costing me, Preble Ramswell, and you know, each of us here, $200 million. And like the other gentleman said, that comes out to $13,000 out of my pocket. It's not coming. It's not like it's going to be added $100 to all of our bills.
It's not going to come out of your pocket. It's not going to be general obligation debt under any scenario. It would be electric utility system debt. It would, as one of the other citizen speakers said, it would be revenue bond debt. It would not be backstopped by potentially requiring a levy against your property. It would be electric revenue system debt, and that's all. The city would not be on the hook, period. The electric, it would be debt pledged by the electric revenues. If anything went wrong, the electric revenues would be there, or would be subject to having to pay it, but that's all.
And turning around and selling it would essentially eliminate all of that, correct? Or to some degree. Can you explain how that would figure in?
If you buy the asset and then sell the asset, you're done. It's really that part of it is really that simple, unless somebody really messes up on the bonded indebtedness, and that's a crazy hypothesis. That wouldn't happen. If you buy it and sell it, you're done. You know, you buy a car, you're able to resell it the next day for a modest profit, or whatever. You insist as part of that next sale that the loan you took to buy it the day before gets paid off.
So the next point they've said was that your power bills are going to go up. And you sort of addressed that already. This isn't going to impact. And if anything, us as a council, our goal is to decrease your power bills, certainly not make them any higher than they are.
There is no reason to think that your rates would go up. They're based on professional estimates by two guys in a position to know, Bill Harrington, who's a PE, and Jerry Warren. There's every reason to believe that you could reduce rates and have some left over to devote to undergrounding. You know, there's no guarantee that Gulf's rates are not going to go up, or that they will go down, or that FPL's rates will go up or go down. There are no real guarantees, but there is no reason to think, with the spread between the estimated cost of acquiring, paying the debt service, running the system, and Gulf's rates, there is no reason on earth to think that the rates would go up from where they are now, which is smack up at the top of the scale in Florida.
So the next point they made was that property and sales tax will jump.
The city
That's
doesn't have the power
just
to raise
abjectly
sales tax.
irrational. There's no relation between property taxes, sales taxes, and electric revenues. You know, when Winter Park bought their system, their property taxes and sales taxes didn't go up.
Yeah.
They took it over and they charged what was then actually, by the time they bought it, it was Progress Energy Florida's rates. They took it over and they charged Progress Energy Florida's rates for some number of years. They are presently lower than Duke Energy Florida, which is the current successor entity.
And of course, us as a city, we don't charge a sales tax. That comes from the county, I believe.
You would charge a sales tax on electric sales to commercial accounts. Residential accounts are exempt from the sales tax, no matter who is selling it.
And then what about reliability and service are going to drop?
There's no reason whatsoever to think that that's true. The average municipal utility, the average of the reporting, there are 33 municipal utilities in Florida. 24 of them report distribution reliability data. Overall, those 24 reporting municipals' reliability on the 5 measures that they collect the data for are overall slightly better than Gulf's. They're noticeably better on a couple. Gulf is better on frequency. The average muni is a lot better on duration.
And then the last point.
And there's just no reason to think that the quality of service is going to decline either.
Absolutely, especially if we get someone, which we wouldn't bring in anyone that's not reputable, but yeah.
You might hire a whole lot of the existing Gulf Power line workers to continue in their jobs. You know, I don't know, but there's no reason to think that. The reliability in Winter Park didn't suffer. The average municipal electric utility system in Florida has completely acceptable reliability.
Their final point was that hurricane response will suffer, and I heard a lot of folks in here kind of echoing that concern.
There's no reason to believe that. The municipal utilities in Florida are participants in a municipal aid agreement, and everybody pitches in a storm. And you can sign up. I've got the forms in my files over here. Folks show up. And, you know, whether it's Tallahassee or OUC or Duke or Gulf or Southern or Alabama Power or the folks from Power South or the co-ops in Alabama or the co-ops in Florida, there are mutual aid agreements that the munis participate in, not just the investor owns, that then folks show up. You know, whether it's directly or you can go out, you wouldn't. You'd participate through the munis, the FMEA and the FMEA, the Municipal Electric Association, would help coordinate all that.
Excellent. And then this question, actually, our city attorney answered at the last meeting, but most of you folks weren't here. And then I've seen it posted on social media and heard it again tonight about why don't we put this out to a vote? And my understanding from the city attorney's explanation last time, and Ms. Kopp, perhaps you can add to that, was that this is a procurement issue, and the city council is in charge of doing procurement issues such as contracts and such. Now, if we were to do an RFP and bring in another company, then that would, my understanding, I think, would go on a ballot for the people to approve Chelco coming in or Duke coming in. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And there's nothing in the charter that permits a referendum to interfere with contract negotiations.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll let Mr. Destin address the questions that didn't cover these that folks were bringing up. But the last thing I'd like to request, I think this would be really helpful, is Mr. Wright, if you could actually put together like a one-pager with an FAQ so that we can, something. Even work with staff to put something like that out that we could just post on the website so people can say, oh, this was my concern, thank you for answering it. I feel like we really need something for people to really have a clear understanding, because everybody has been completely misled through this propaganda.
I'm delighted to present factual information backstopped with referenced sources for any questions you all want. The reason I kind of chuckled is that it's probably going to take more than one page.
Understood. Thank you so much.
How many hours is that, Shep, at $3.50 an hour?
My rate is $225 an hour, and not a whole lot, frankly.
That's not what you quoted me. You said you charged me $3.50.
I charge the city my government rate, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, there you go. All right, Mr. Overdeer.
Okay. The only question, I just need a little clarification, because I'm probably as uneducated as most of the citizens are here. The action that we took last Thursday night, did that enter us into further negotiations with Gulf Power for a new franchise agreement, or did this enter us into negotiations with Gulf Power to buy Gulf Power?
May I? Me? Okay. Thank you. It directed us, your attorneys, to proceed toward arbitration. It did not specifically, let me continue on that one. It directed us to proceed toward the arbitration process. It did not direct us to negotiate with Gulf for the purchase of the system. There's no reason that we could not, the city, could not negotiate with Gulf toward the purchase of the system in this context. I don't think that's probably what will happen. There's no reason it couldn't. In terms of continuing negotiations toward a new franchise with Gulf Power, the resolution that the council adopted when you were at the league, did not direct such negotiations to continue, but there's no reason that such negotiations cannot continue.
So what are we at arbitration over?
The purchase price for for that part of the distribution system that the city may decide it wants to purchase.
Okay, so
which probably is going to be everything from the distributions down to the meters in practical terms.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, then, our negotiations over the franchise agreement are done.
Well, that's what I heard a few minutes ago. They don't have to be, was my answer to your question.
Well, I don't know what they told Kyron, but Kyron said that they're done, but that's not the information I received today. I got the message from them that they were in receipt of our resolution. They got it this afternoon. They would be reviewing it, and they'd be contacting me again very soon. So at the end of the day, I have no intention of ignoring them. We'll continue negotiating, but at the same time, determining what a value could be. Because at the end of the day, if it comes to be that it's $200 million and you can't bond out and the revenue doesn't work, you don't buy the system. You just don't buy it because the money doesn't work right. So you just abandon that at that point, and you just get into a franchise agreement with your current provider.
Is that it? Kyron?
Okay.
Second
Anyway, I'm not going to argue that point. I just got it from a source at Gulf Power. And that may be the case, but what I'm trying to find out is, I don't see anything in what the majority of the council passed on Thursday saying that we are going to do any negotiation. I'm just going by what it's worded in that last section of number 8. And I too got those robocalls. I got 6 of them on my landline. And amazingly, the 200 million they quoted, amazingly that the Daily News article quoted me as stating it could be with $100 to $200 million. In answer to the robocalls, and Mr. Mitchell was right, somebody out there, because if you've gotten these phone calls about your Mercedes needs to be updated or something like that, or the IRS is coming after you, there's a computer program out there where they can use dead phone numbers, call you up, make these threats or little questions, and if anybody's ever gotten a phone call and they're asking for tests, that's an interesting one. But that's where those robocalls are coming from. I'm not saying there's not misinformation out there, and that some people have said there's PACs and stuff like that that are out there. I still believe that we don't have enough data and information for what we're doing right now. And even though the charter is stating that we don't have to do certain things, I think that instead of believing some of the stuff that comes out of Tallahassee, that we get direct stuff from Gulf Power, direct stuff from us, and have some workshops before we make these final decisions, which is why, amazingly, that the 4th option came up just before we voted on Thursday night. So it's not that I'm against having an option to purchase. It's just the way that we're going about it, I think, is wrong. I think the citizens, although they elected the seven members up here on the council, I just think the citizens need to be, more informed, and I just do not believe in my capacity as a council member that I would be able to do something like this, because there's so many unknowns. Just like Ms. Ramswell was asking questions and Mr. Wright was answering them, there are too many unknowns. We really don't know if our prices are going to go up, down, or where they're going to go. And we really don't know what the company that's purchasing Gulf Power might have a better offer for us after this is all over with. So that's where I stand, and that's why I voted against it before, and and everything. And my understanding from Ms. Kopp is that if one of the prevailing members or Mr. Overdeer were to make a motion to rescind or to change anything about it, they can do so, but I'm just locked out of what I can do except still vote the way I've been voting. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
By the way, I hit the wrong button, so if anybody else wants to talk, hit your buttons.
We haven't been called communists or Soviets tonight, so it's a market improvement from Thursday.
Yet.
Yeah, I think public comment on the issue is closed, Mayor. So I think we're safe for now. Yeah, they certainly can. So Parker did a fine job explaining the situation. In essence, on Thursday, I probably would have voted to approve the contract with Gulf Power if they had let us retain our purchase option and our leverage with them for future negotiations. But the way that they had worded the purchase option had completely taken away any future leverage this council would have with Gulf Power, and I can't, in good conscience, sign away this city's rights, the future generations' rights to negotiate with their electric franchise. And they wouldn't even get a seat at the table the way that the franchise was written on Thursday night. And I'm 31 years old. I'm going to be here for a long time, and I can't sign away my children's right to negotiate with their electric franchise, and that's what we were going to do. And that's inherently wrong, and there's no amount of deliberately there's no amount of public pressure that's going to change my mind on that. I believe it, and Gulf Power surely will run another smear campaign, and it's just not going to sway me, because there's what's right and there's what's wrong. And signing over a monopoly in perpetuity over this community is the wrong thing to do. And there's nothing that's going to change my opinion of that. And the only way we had to protect this city from that monopoly was exercising that purchase option. Or we could have kicked the can down the road with the 2-year extension, but I'm convinced that this council has the fortitude to stand up and do what's right for this community instead of continuing to kick the can down the road in 2 years and let's see what new elections play out and let's politicize it during the next elections. But there's what's right and there's what's wrong, and I'm convinced we did what's right on Thursday. And we'll continue this process. If Gulf Power wanted to put the purchase provision back in the contract the way that we've always had it, so we could retain leverage with them and we could retain a seat at the table, I would certainly highly consider voting for it. But until they do that, we're going to have to go down this process. So,
Stay there, Shep.
Yes, sir.
All right. I've heard in a couple places about making the facts known as we know them, and I think that's what a thing that concerns most of the people in this room and outside the room. And what I would make a suggestion is maybe Parker and myself can get together, because we work cheaper than the attorneys do, and come up with a fact list as we know them, and we'll.
Y'all would have to get together in a public meeting. Sir.
Well, we can do it in a workshop format if we need to, or with our city attorneys, which we're allowed to do, and come up with a fact list that we could put on Destin City website to combat any propaganda or anything like that. And we can put the facts as we know them, wherever we are in the process. I've got 2 questions for you, Shep. What does the resolution 1831 say? Because that's where a lot of the confusion was, is what we voted on Thursday. What's it really mean? You've heard people ask, even some of the council members have asked for more clarity. Because what it says, under Section 5, what it says is terms of franchise - right to purchase. But the meat of the thing is in the whereases. In the whereas, on page 2 of 3, it says, whereas the city, Destin Council, governing body of the city of Destin has determined, and it says, a true and real need exists to exercise the right to purchase. And it says contained within the franchise agreement that we've been under in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Destin. And it was repeated by a number of the council members and some of the people in the community. That's a concern. The health, well-being of our community, and paying high, power bills is not protecting your well-being. But then the next whereas, it says the city of Destin, through exercising this resolution, and here's some key words, is expressly and unconditionally exercising the right to purchase, and is electing to commence the process created via Section 180. And it says, and here's the one, and I want to make sure that this is what it says, and this is what it means. It says, which shall result in the ultimate purchase of assets from Gulf Power. And the reason I'm putting this out is for my own edification here, and I'm sure of everyone else's. There is no ambiguity of what we did by passing this resolution. By what I just read, it says we're going to buy it. Right? Is that what it says? That we're going to buy this? I'll give you time to answer.
Yeah, no, that's a fair reading of what it says.
Okay.
I will tell you that it's a bifurcated process in what Mr. Destin said a little while ago. That is, if the price is not acceptable, you don't have to buy it.
Okay.
You have a right to buy it. You have exercised that right, thereby protecting and preserving that right.
The vote is the vote. I just want to make sure that we all understand. So when people ask us, what did you do? That we can tell them, we are exercising the right to buy this power company, and the end result of this resolution is we're going to buy it. That's our intent as of today.
Could I interject for just a second?
Because it's part
Mayor?
of what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure out what it says and then what it means. I haven't got to the what it means part. And I'm doing this for everyone's edification, not for a position.
It sounds like you're speaking for all of us, Mayor.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to get him to speak, to tell us what it says.
Well, you just said
and
what our intent is.
Well, that's Isn't that what we want the people to know, what our intent is?
Well, that's, my intent may be different than yours.
Go ahead.
Your city attorney wants to address you, Mr. Mayor.
In preparing for this meeting, I talked to Jeff about Thursday night. Of course, I wasn't there, but he had filled me in, and my understanding was, yes, the resolution authorizes the purchase. It exercises that right, but at the same time, right after the vote on the resolution, the council gave specific direction to Mr. Burns, Mr. Wright, and Councilmember Destin to continue to negotiate as well. So it's supposed to be a simultaneous and parallel type of procedure where it could go really either way, is my understanding. Is that not correct?
And before I want to help you understand why. So without stepping on Chef's toes, because he is the expert in the room, you know, in my previous life as a lawyer, I've done 3 of these franchise agreements. I did one on behalf when we were representing the town of Cinco Bayou, and I represented on the flip side Okaloosa Gas Company. And so what I'm saying is, your issue right here is with the very specific legal language that says we're buying it. The reason I believe that you have to say that is if you're wishy-washy with your language, you open yourself for litigation by a very motivated party, Gulf Power, to argue in a court of law that you have not exactly fully executed and pulled the trigger on exercising your right to purchase. You can't have wishy-washy language. You can change your mind. It's a resolution. We change resolutions all the time, and if we get down to the end of the road and change our mind because the value is not what works out, we change our mind. But at this moment, you have to say unequivocally, this is what we're doing, so you do not open yourself to future challenges where Gulf Power says, well, you got a wishy-washy on that actual exercise of your option, and we're going to litigate with you for the next 3 years on whether or not you actually successfully exercised your option. You can't be wishy-washy. There's a reason from a legal standpoint why they've said what they've said. And it's not because we're terrifying. It's not because we want to scare people. It's not because we want this council to be forever wed to that position. But you have to unequivocally exercise it. Otherwise, you open yourself to litigation, and we cannot risk that with Gulf Power, who does not want to let us even go forward an inch on this.
So we're clear on what it says.
Yes, sir.
And he explained why.
He
Now,
did. Yes, sir.
Then the second question for everyone to know is, what does it mean? And I think he touched on it. What it says is one thing, but it can mean something else. And I'll let you address it, like we can continue to negotiate on the side.
In terms of what it says and what it means we're directed, what it says, to go forward with the arbitration process. That's what it means. You have exercised the right unequivocally, no wishy-washy. We're going to go forward toward the arbitration process. The other part, in terms of continuing to negotiate a new franchise, is separate and apart from this. You know, this is, you got 2 parties who may, as far as I can tell, y'all are certainly willing to talk to them. I think maybe we got some conflicting evidence on whether they're willing to talk to us, but I think this is something that we can continue talking about. And,
I appreciate it. Sure. And the reason is because, like, on social media, certain camps are saying, well, this is what it says, and that's what it means. And other people says, oh, no, this is what it says, and this is what it means.
If the price comes in at $350 million, we're going to have to go spend $350 million. That's not right.
Okay. Ms. Ramswell.
I actually was going to bring up the fact about the negotiation was a second piece that we did last time. But, you know, I look at this as we've got the right to purchase. We've also got the right not to purchase. So look at it that way.
Mr. Morgan.
Do we need a motion to direct Parker to come up with the informational booklet about what we're doing?
Yeah, I think the idea out there is just have some type of City of Destin official position on the facts. It's basically, Kim, what's the best avenue for our council to take that?
Yeah, you can direct that if that's what you want to do.
I'll volunteer. If I have the opportunity, I'd like to sit down with Chef and Jeff, who have been my legal advisors. As we've gone through this process, I was negotiating for a little while. We've been gathering information. Let me take a stab at it, and then I'll bring it back to council for their review, their approval before we ever send anything out, if that works for everybody.
Yeah, and just design it to put it on the website. So got to keep it not at your level, but at mine. Fisherman's level. How about
Mayor,
that?
can I ask one question?
Go ahead,
Jeff Parker?
Mr. Marler. Ask a question.
Okay. This council directed that we could go back into negotiations. Basically, we're playing poker. What if they say no? They don't want to negotiate anymore. Just flat out. What's...
You want me to answer that? Chef, go for it. I mean, I think...
We proceed toward arbitration.
You've never had another direction you could really reasonably take. You just take the path that's before you. But if they tell us to go pound sand, then that's what we have to do. And that's at their own risk of losing the system, because this is very risky, high-stakes business. We're talking $200 million. People will fight like cats and dogs over this kind of money, and that's why you've seen all those mailers. That's why there's a very sophisticated, cohesive smear campaign. It's why my face, his face have appeared in half-page ads. Who do you think's paying for all this stuff? Gulf Power is, which is actually even more depressing. We're paying for it because we're ratepayers. We're paying for our own propaganda and brainwashing, which is even a more depressing part of this whole thing. But at the end of the day, we would follow the same path that we're down right now, because at the end of the day, last Thursday, it was either pull the trigger or lose it. And because our existing franchise agreement, the 30-year one, ends Friday. We had no other option, so we went with what was the most rational decision with the information ahead of us.
Thank you, Shep. Thank you, Mr. Destin. Thank you, Mr. Marler. We're going to move on.
Thank you, sir. Am I excused?
Yes, sir. That's what I said. I wouldn't thank you if I wanted you to stay up there.
Did we want to address the questions that were brought up by the folks here? Or
Did we cover most of them?
Okay, just making sure there
I
wasn't
saw some
anything
people leave,
left
so they're
unsaid.
satisfied or they're really mad. I don't know. All right, let's move on to the city manager's report. Shep, you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much for answering our questions, as difficult they may have been.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm glad to be here and I'm at your service. Thank you.
All right, we're on item number 4, city manager's report.
Mayor, I see a member of the public that wants to speak, and he probably has some follow-up questions. And for the sake, we have a very long agenda tonight, and I will personally answer any questions that you have. I have an email address. Can you send anything to me? Can you write them down, or can you just wait until after the meeting and find me? I promise you we can have a one-on-one, and I will discuss it because it takes a long time to get through this stuff. It's very dense. But I'm not going to neglect your questions and leave you worried about a few unanswered issues. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your consideration. All right, Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I have a few items tonight to briefly discuss. First item is looking for some advice or some direction from council regarding a parcel located at 108 Seibert Avenue. This parcel is in between two parcels currently owned by the city, and I have Mr. Schmidt here to follow up and answer any questions regarding this.
Yeah, we've been talking for the past several years with the owner of the property, who at one point wanted $1 million, and has ratcheted it down considerably since then. Actually, it's on the market right now for $400,000. We got an appraisal done. Our appraisal showed $250,000. The sellers got an appraisal. Their appraisal was for $425,000. So obviously, we have some differences, and there are some differences in the appraisals. But basically, it's on the market for $400,000 today. We thought it might be a good idea to own all that property because it's surrounded on. We're a logical owner. It's surrounded on all four sides by city property and right of way. It would actually complete a very nice piece of property for a parking lot, and would just like to get your guidance on how you'd like to proceed.
Mr. Destin.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, it's clear. That's a piece of property we need to probably acquire if the price has become very reasonable. I'll go ahead and make a motion that instructs Mr. Johnson, and of course Mr. Schmidt if he's been involved, along with the city attorney to preliminarily approach the landowner for acquisition.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We got a second for discussion. Mr. Dixon.
Yeah, I seen $250,000 that basically the recommended motion was to offer $250, if I read that correctly. Is that the recommended motion? Wasn't that to offer the $250?
Yeah, I didn't read the recommended motion. I just kind of went off the cuff. But if you would prefer the recommended motion with a specific price, I can amend.
We didn't make a recommended motion because, obviously, if you were to ask me, I would recommend that we offer no more than our appraised value at this point. But everything's up for negotiation.
I truly don't think that piece of property is worth more than $250,000. But now,
Yeah, I know, but that's on the fair market value to a third party. It's different for us who need it from an acquisition standpoint. If they approach her and bring us back a couple numbers, then we can entertain it.
I'd be glad to look at it, but I will tell you this, that I can't imagine that they could do much else with that property. So I would think that we're probably going to be the only game in town, and right next to a cemetery, all the above. I think we can get it for $250 if they want to sell it.
We got a motion, we got a second, and I guess we can, as they start that, we can direct you to offer them $250,000 without it being part of the motion, correct? The way you made the motion?
My motion was simply to approach them and bring back what you think we should offer. Given this is, we need to, look, we're going to have a debate on whether or not we're getting fleeced, but I think it would be better after we have a hard number what they expect. I had heard somewhere in the 400s, but...
They're going to want $450, we're going to want $250. If we make a $250 offer, I think that's the starting part.
I'm going to lean on staff. Staff, what do you think would be more, to save time?
Well, right now, the parcel is listed at 400.
Okay.
So somewhere between 250 and 400 is where it's going to end up.
Probably.
This you want to talk about. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's not worth 400. Well, would we like to have it? Could we use it? Sure. Do we need it? No. There's no way I could support, it appraised at 250. We don't need it to spend $400,000 on a piece of property. Yeah, it'd be nice to have it. But I'm not going to support it. We can go off from the 250 that it appraised for. If he wants to sell it for that, I'll support that. That's all I got, Mayor.
Thanks, sir. Lance.
If you want us to investigate and bring back a number where we think it's going to land, then we'd be happy to do that at the next meeting.
Sounds good.
All right, we're taking a vote. It's unanimous, so moved. City Manager, go ahead.
Thank you. Item B is the interlocal agreement with the Okaloosa County. This is a routine agreement that we use for the funding they give us to maintain our waterfront parks and our beach access points. We're looking for a motion to approve, and we have Mr. Farmer and myself here to answer any questions regarding this.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and make the recommended motion. I move that the interlocal agreement for waterfront access maintenance and capital improvements between the City of Destin and the County TDD be approved.
I have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. Ms. Ramswell, did you want to discuss that further? You were just up for the motion. We got a motion, we got a second. Seeing no further discussion. A vote of 7-0, unanimous, so moved.
We have item C, which is the adoption of a new investment policy resolution 18-27, which brings our current policy in alignment with the state's recommendation. We have Mr. Farmer here to answer any questions, and we're looking for a vote to approve.
Is there a recommended motion with that?
I move that Resolution 18-27, City Investment Policy, be adopted.
I have a second. I mean, a motion.
Second.
Got a second. Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Mayor. Brad, can you give us a sort of a where's this coming from? Is it just an update to the investment policies from a state statute standpoint and we're updating, or can you just give us some background?
Our current policy that you passed 3 or 4 years ago complied with the state statute for investments within a municipality with some lacking language that they felt needed to be in a investment policy for all municipalities as well as counties and the state. Our auditors over the last couple of years said what you have is fine, but you really at some point ought to readopt your policy and cover all of those points that the state requires. And that's really all this has done. The way our funds are currently invested are already operating under that. It actually added about 4 different additional investments that are similar to what we have that we could potentially invest our funds in. But really we're just adopting a policy that now completely complies with what the state requirements are for an investment policy.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion. Vote unanimous, so moved.
Item D is the feasibility of getting an Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office deputy to assist code enforcement during peak season. This is for informational purposes, and I have Ms. Karen Jankowski here to give you the update.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I believe this was brought up by a council member or our city attorney at the previous council meeting. And so what was suggested was to bring back some information about kind of putting some staffing available for to help out our code enforcement officers either during peak season or year-round. So what I did was I reached out to our code enforcement manager. I did a little bit of salary survey data. I talked with Mr. Johnson, city manager, and tried to get some information for you guys to consider going forward. What we've like for you to consider is under our contract management policy, we've got where we just do continuous services and we do contracts of some sort. We'd like for you to consider doing it under contract services instead of a sheriff's contract amendment. This gives us a little bit more room so we can bring back, more options, or if we want maybe an off-duty officer or individuals out there that might have some security, if they do security at condos and those kinds of things where they have a lot more, we have a lot more options on the table to do it that way. I've talked with Mr. Mahone, and he feels that maybe we could do it year-round. I feel maybe that we could do it during peak season, which would be March through Labor Day, having a couple officers or individuals on a part-time status. This way we won't have to take care of all the benefits and everything that roll into that as well. And it gives us, I think, more options. So if folks have full-time jobs, then they can do part-time work during the evening shifts. And then this would get us also probably, if you would like, 7-day coverage for code enforcement type of regulations, which could be the beach safety corridor, could be noise issues, could be parking, could be right-of-way. So there could be a lot of different avenues that we could tackle as well based on what you guys feel is most important or where the needs need to be. So I'm open for questions on that, discussion.
All right, Mr. Dixon.
My line of thinking, and I was one of the ones who brought this up, my line of thinking was that when we send a code enforcement officer out to do a project, they may have to go to the same place 2 or 3 times, and even after that, they're still not going to gain compliance because we simply do not have the strength maybe that the sheriff's office would, or the presence that they would. So my idea would be that once we get to those, basically the people that are not complying, will not comply, is to turn it over and let the sheriff's office deal with it in a little bit different level, and I think we'll gain a lot more compliance. Along with the problems that we have on Holiday Isle and Crystal Beach, where we have these parking issues, if we have somebody there that is law enforcement versus a city code enforcement, I think that we're going to get more compliance. I think that we'll have a lot happier customers, and not just do it one day of the week, but do it for like Saturdays, especially when they're checking in, to let them know, hey, you got to park in the right spots. And law enforcement, I think, can do some of the stuff that our code enforcement may not be able to get done. Not saying anything negative about code enforcement. I'm just saying that a lot of times that uniform, that makes a difference. And I realize that we may have to come up with some different type regulations, and when I say I don't want to over-regulate everything, but some regulations to be able to allow them to have the teeth they need to be able to get the job done. As it is now, give you an example, if there's a truck or a car that's been parked on the right-of-way for 3 months, 4 months, or whatever it may be, we'll have a code enforcement officer go by there 2 or 3 times, and they're not moving it. You know, they just don't move it. And, you know, we put orange stickers on the windows, and does absolutely no good. But I think if we do get somebody by there that can make them move it, I think we'll have better compliance. I think the people out there will be a little happier as well. So that's my line of thinking on having law enforcement do it. But there could be a whole laundry list of things that we would get them to do, but maybe not have them out there every day like this time of the year or whatever, but in our peak seasons and when we have trouble where we have specific areas that we can't get compliance with, maybe at the end of that week or whatever it may be, then we send a law enforcement officer by to take a look at it. So this I think can be utilized in a productive way without spending a whole bunch of money on it. So just my ideas.
And to elaborate on that, your recommendation, do it through contract services, gives you the flexibility. You're not having to actually ask the sheriff to give us an additional budget item, how much it's going to have a full-time deputy or something like that. Contract services more allows you to call at certain times for certain things at a specific need, correct?
Yes, and then also with having a part-time employee, the liability would be still on that individual. Equipment, life insurance, you know, benefits, all that kind of stuff would be on that individual. They would provide us a certificate of insurance, obviously, but then the costs, we would try to keep the costs down. And if I can say, you know, I would hope that there's a level of understanding, but maybe we can create some sort of SOP or standard operating procedure when our code enforcement officers get to a certain level, and I would believe that that is now, maybe Captain Nix can correct me if I'm wrong, but if there's a certain level of where that they don't feel safe, or if they don't feel they're getting compliance, that they can call the sheriff's office, and the deputies that are designated for our area can come and assist. And I'm assuming that's how it works currently. So, but if you'd like to see maybe a standard operating procedure for that, maybe we can develop something like that with our code enforcement officers for certain types of things at a certain level. If we're not getting compliance, we can get more of an immediate response, something like that.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Not to get into all this tonight, I'd like to just sort of put a bug in your ear for future reference, but code enforcement currently operates under community development. Is that correct? I'd like to discuss in the future I don't know if feasibility is the correct word, the appropriateness maybe, if that's the right place for it, and maybe seeing whether it would be better as a standalone department. So just put that in your ear for future discussion, please.
Maybe we get that on as a full-blown agenda item.
We'll bring that back.
Mr. Marler.
Could you look into the possibility, I'm not sure exactly how the sheriff's posse works under the sheriff, but it's possibly we might be able to utilize them also. Just check with the sheriff to see if that can be done.
Absolutely, and the way that Ms. Jankowski described putting that money into contract services would allow us to still utilize off-duty deputies, and it would allow us to use posse members when they're available. They're very shorthanded right now. I know this because I use them for some of our events, but we will absolutely use them when we can.
All right, thank you very much, Karen.
I think we need to, can we direct the city manager to come up with a scope of work to provide to the sheriff's office? I believe that the sheriff is looking for some direction on what the scope would be.
So moved.
Okay, I got a motion.
Second.
We got a second. Seeing no further discussion. Vote unanimous, so moved. Lance?
Very good. I'll keep going while Ms. Jankowski is at the microphone. She has two updates, one regarding the city manager search and one regarding the community development director search.
Good evening again. Sorry, hopefully I'll keep this short for you guys. City manager candidates, we have about 40, I believe 45 was the last count. Received a couple over the weekend. The position is open until the 23rd. I have given Mr. Eddy with FCCMA all of the resumes and applications that we received up until last Friday. So I would like to, if I could, entertain some discussion on the next steps since we're getting close to the closing of the position advertisement. If you'd like to do a workshop with Mr. Eddy, if you'd like for him to narrow those 40-some candidates down, and then I can provide you those narrowed down candidates' applications and resumes for you to look at. You know, some sort of direction on the next few steps that you'd like for me and Mr. Eddy to move forward with, please.
Don't everybody jump at once. I don't see you, but go ahead, sir. You have the floor.
Is there a way that we can review these applications, that we can get these applications to take a look at? And the reason I say that, if they decide to pare them down, they may pare them down to 10, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if they want us to look at all these applications, I hate to try to read 45 or 50 or 60 by the time it's over with applications at one time. I'd like to be able to look at them as long as I can, and to be able to pare them down a little bit on my own. So I was just hoping to be able to, if it's okay, that we would get the applications and take a look. And of course, I would never call any of these people or anything like that, but I would like to look at them just to see what we're getting, if that's possible.
I'll chime in just for a minute. I think what Ms. Jankowski's asking is exactly that. We can send all 45, or we can bring it down to whatever number you want on a short list. So it's up to y'all how far you want Mr. Eddy to narrow this
I
down.
would like to see all of them, and then to see the pared down, and just to see whether I agree with the pared down portion of it. And we may have somebody that we see in there that we see something that they may not, and maybe like to bring that person up or bring them forward and say, you know, why didn't you consider this person or something like that. So for us to be able to look at them, I think would help us. And there's going to be, of course, an obvious winner, but I'd like to at least look at all of them.
I agree with that.
Ms. Jankowski, would you include your qualifications rubric that you guys, you and Mr. Eddy, would probably use in your methodology so that we can all understand? Because I like to think I know certain things, but honestly, we probably all could benefit from what the characteristics are, that just from the criteria standpoint of what your methodology would be, why some would go this way or some that way, so I can also apply that methodology as I'm looking through them.
Typically, I use the job description, but I'll double check with Mr. Eddy and see what rubric that he uses. But typically, that's at minimum qualifications and meets minimum standards. That's kind of what I go with. But I'll double check with him. I'll be happy to do that. If you'd like to see all of the paper, I can send those in an email. But the stack is about probably 4.5 inches or so. Or an option 2 is I can build a spreadsheet and do, qualifications, most recent 3 and years of service. I don't want to say.
I'd just like to see them all, and
Okay.
even if you have to break them up into 4 or 5 different emails, I would prefer to see all of it.
I could put thumb drive or Dropbox, that kind of thing for you guys.
Okay, thanks.
I'd be happy to do that.
One follow-up question. The time period actually closes on September the 22nd. Do you want staff to go ahead and send you what we have and then send the rest when we get it?
I'll be happy to do that. If you don't have any other questions, I'd like to give an update about the Community Development Director. So far, we've got about 16 candidates. The position advertisement has closed out. The interviewing panel has narrowed it down to 4. We're going to start interviews on Wednesday. But one of the options that Mr. Johnson and I were talking about that we would like you to consider, and we've done it in the past, is potentially if you guys would like to do a meet and greet with the top few candidates. I would try probably my best to schedule it right before a council meeting night, so we would bring the individuals in, do in-person interviews, and then maybe have like a 5 o'clock sort of hour for you guys to meet and greet these individuals on a informal basis and do something like that. But we wanted to throw that option out and see if you would like to entertain that. If not, we can move forward as scheduled.
Well, this is under the city manager's hiring purview, so rather than ours. But have you been involved in this process and the narrowing down of candidates?
Actually, I'm involved in the round 2, which hasn't taken place yet. It'll take place later this week. So we will get it narrowed down, and I have been involved directly in meet and greets that involved council and the public in the past. I think it's a great way for you to get to meet these people and get a first impression, and you can use that information however you choose to use it.
Mr. Braden? Oh, I'm sorry.
I like that. I would personally like to meet them myself. I have another question. Who was on the interviewing panel?
The interview panel, which starts on Wednesday, is myself, Ms. Noelle Bells, our building official, Mr. Steve Schmidt, and Mr. David Campbell. And then on the second round, I'm going to involve Lance with those top 4 candidates. We like to make sure to get a first round interview. Then what we have them do is assessments. It gives us a personality profile, a job assessment, some different, attributes for the position itself. And so we bring those in, and everybody reviews those prior to the second round interview to help us kind of really feel the position out. We would like to have the candidates come in person. We're going to do Skype for the first round. We'd like to have them come in person. Some of them are coming from out of state, so there's going to be a little bit of costs involved with that based on our travel policy. But that's kind of the whole.
You good?
Yeah, I guess. I got some issues with that, but I'm not going to go into that right now.
You got the floor.
Yeah, I'm good, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Dixon.
With this position, basically, it just came, just like every other department has, a recommendation from you, right? I mean, from the city manager, right?
Yes, it'll be from the city manager, and this is a typical process. We put an interview panel together, we develop interview questions.
Well, I'm talking about for the public works director, or the community development director, I'm sorry, for that
Yes.
position.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about that position in meet and greet, right? Okay. We've really never done that before on those type positions. Is it something that?
We did it, I believe it was Jerry Miller, or excuse me, Jerry Musey, excuse me, our former community development director. We did it for, I think, a public services director at one point in my tenure here, and then I think one other one. So I was trying to just.
I don't have a problem doing it, but if you're going to make a recommendation as to a person that we're supposed to hire, and basically 4 of us have a different opinion of a different person, it could create somewhat of a problem. But however the council wants to do it, I'm open. I just know that we should do that with the city manager position, but I just don't know about further down.
I think when Lance and I were discussing it, we wanted to just make this as transparent as possible. We wanted to make sure that you guys all were comfortable with the process, comfortable with the people, and just trying to kind of extend this as an option that we've done before in the past. I think we sort of got away from it really because of budget, because of the travel, that costs that incurred with director level positions. So, we just wanted to make sure that you guys were comfortable with it and extend this option that has been used in the past.
Ms. Ramswell.
I don't want to encourage micromanagement or more work for the city manager, but I would like to see you more involved in the narrowing down and the interviewing. I mean, I don't know if that's something feasible, and is that so different from what's been done in the past? I don't know. Since you have the ultimate hiring authority, I would like to see you involved in that process and the weeding process.
Thank you. And honestly, it's something that Ms. Jankowski and I need to discuss after this meeting. My understanding was that it would be narrowed to a number less than 15, and then I would be involved from that point forward, bringing it down to 4 or 5 of the top candidates. The Parks and Recreation Director was also an individual that met in a forum like I'm discussing. I was one of those people. I thought that it was good. It made me very nervous, but it made me feel good. I had to meet the council members. I had to talk to them. So if you're not in favor, I understand, but I just wanted to offer it because it is a chance for the council members to get to know these individuals one-on-one and see facial expressions and things like that. And this item will ultimately require a vote of council to be approved for the position.
Sure, I mean, any opportunity is terrific. I just would like to see you have more involvement in the hiring process, especially when it comes to narrowing down a large field of candidates.
You're next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll let you and Ms. Jankowski sort that 15 versus 4 issue out internally, but basically under the charter, this council has the approval of department heads, which kind of makes us like the Senate during Supreme Court nominations. They bring you a candidate, and they have hearings, and sometimes they turn into a circus, but we're not going to do that. What we're going to do, I think this is a good process, and frankly, getting to meet these candidates is especially as important of a position as the Community Development Director. I think it's very important that we get an opportunity to see candidates face to face, get to ask some questions, get a feel for them, rather than the other sort of perfunctory rubber stamp system that we've operated in the past, where just a name's thrown and said, this is the new person I've selected, this is the person I want to hire, I want your yes votes, without a whole lot of review. So I like the idea of a back and forth, and I don't want to micromanage you guys, but under the charter we're required to approve the department heads, and I think we need all the information we can get. I think this is a pretty good idea, so I'm comfortable with supporting it.
Mr. Brayton.
Thank you. Yeah, my last thoughts on it. I don't know what the real answer is. I just know my personal opinion, the last 2 that we had was a total disaster. So I don't know what the answer is to hiring one that's just really qualified. But I mean, I'm definitely not the expert, but I would really like the opportunity to meet them and really not make a, at least have at least 2 weeks, after the fact. To do my own research, and then ultimately have, whatever fiver it is, come to the council. That's all I have, Mayor.
Skip.
Okay, so I guess if we're going to do it that way, I mean, then I guess I don't understand how the process is going to work. So if they come in here and we all see them and we all interview them or whatever, and then Tuffy likes this one and I like this one and the mayor likes this one, But then the city manager likes this one and decides to bring that name forward. Are we going to say, well, no, that's not the one we liked? I mean, I'm not sure if we're just gumming this process up. I get what you're saying about the city charter saying that we're responsible for saying and giving our approval, but I think we approve the one that he brings to us. If we don't like the one he brings to us, okay, that's fine. Then we tell him, no, go back to the drawing board. This isn't the one we want. But I don't see how the 7 or 8 of us up here interviewing all of them, are we then going to make recommendations to the city manager and say, okay, this is the one we want, and he's going to say, well, let's see, 4 of you want this one and 3 of you want this one. Okay, I'll put this one forward.
I think perhaps rather than in the middle of the meeting offering recommendations in front of those 4 or 5 people who have to sit there wide-eyed looking at us, I think probably one-on-one meet with the city manager, give him your thoughts, and then the city manager can take all 7 of our opinions and distill it down to what he thinks is probably the best decision. And if he brings that individual forward, then if we approve or don't approve, will dictate what the next step would be for him to make another selection. In the same way that if a Supreme Court nominee came up and he doesn't have the votes, well then Donald Trump has to go back and pick a different one.
Mr. Marler.
Everybody's touching on the same thing, and it's the separation of powers of legislative and administration, and that's part of administration. And Parker's right, we have the ultimate decision at the end, but it's based upon the recommendation of what the city manager decides. So the meet and greet is fine, and I kind of like the suggestion Parker just made about we can go and talk individually to the city manager after the meet and greet and say what we think about the one person. So I just don't want to get I just don't want us to get involved in the micromanagement situation that we keep touching on so closely. That's all I have.
Thanks, sir. And how about that? Is that the end of that?
That's very good. And I'll rank the top 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if it's not number 1, then we'll go to number 2. All
right. Sounds good. Consent agenda, item number 6.
I have a couple more. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I have a couple announcements real quick.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
That's all right. Regarding some information I gave to the council at the last meeting, Buck Destin tennis/pickleball courts being resurfaced and the fencing repaired. I thought that it was still in the budget because the last time I had been in budget meetings with the former city manager and Mr. Farmer, it was in the budget. After our meeting, the first meeting of this month, I learned that item or those dollars had actually been pulled because we needed to balance the budget, and that was a nicety that I'm not going to defend why it was pulled, but it was pulled, and we have gone back and looked at the money available in the current year budget, the 18 budget, and we can still fund this project. So it is under consent tonight. I just wanted you to know that I gave you wrong information at the last meeting. I thought it was budgeted for FY19. It's not, but we have enough money left in 18 that we can take care of this. And lastly, I have actually 2 more things real quick. Tetra Tech did provide a proposal for revising the plans for Captain Royal Melvin Heritage Park. I emailed that to council earlier this afternoon, and we can bring that up at the next meeting and get firm direction from council on how we want to proceed. The Crosstown Connector, I have an update. Mr. Campbell is here to talk about that briefly and some potential dates for some workshops.
That's right. Very briefly, the TDD agreed to fund the construction of the Crosstown Connector, $4.8 million, and that would be due to the city on October 1st, 2020. The FDOT 5-year work plan contains right-of-way acquisition for about $2.7 million of right-of-way acquisition money in the years 2021, 2022. Well, in order for us to begin construction, we have to acquire the right-of-way. So I'll be bringing back next council meeting a resolution basically stating that council is in support of a advance funding agreement with DOT, And the advance funding agreement is exactly what we did for those signals, where they had it funded in years out and we desired to have them installed now. We paid for them and had them installed. And then in the years out, which just occurred this year, we got reimbursed our $750,000 that we paid for those signals. And this would be the same thing with the right-of-way acquisition. So if you, I'll bring that back next week for your consideration.
Mr. Destin?
And if you'd like to if you have any questions, I'll certainly answer them.
I was going to ask you, did you need any direction from a motion standpoint, or just consensus that that's the good idea and course of action?
If anyone, yeah, a consensus would be fine.
Yeah, I think we've done this in the past with other issues. I don't think it's anything out of the normal to go ahead and try to get an advance funding agreement. So proceed, please.
Okay. The next item is regarding structured parking solutions. I think most of you know that, and Greg Darden is here with Structured Parking Solutions, and Mike Warnke from Volkert Engineers. We've been conducting information gathering meetings with the stakeholders in the Harbor District and with the general public. The next step was going to be for Structured Parking Solutions to bring back a memorandum of understanding. They're prepared to do that at the next council meeting. There's also talk of having a transportation workshop. And based on your decision, next council meeting with the memorandum of understanding, will determine when we can have a transportation workshop, because the transportation, both vehicular and pedestrian, as well as the parking, go hand in hand. So if you decide to go forward with the memorandum of understanding, we could potentially have a transportation workshop as early as the 22nd of October. Don't need a motion for that. We're just good.
Got the green light.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Is that it, Lance, on that?
That's all I have.
All
Thank
right. Next up, consent agenda.
Mayor, I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as proposed, items A through D.
I'll second it.
I got a motion. Got a second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, let's vote. See you later. We'll be right behind you, hopefully. Preble. Ayes have it. So moved. All right, we'll move on into item 7. I don't know what anybody wants to talk about. The only thing we got listed is from our land use attorney, her discussion. Would I like to remind the council members if you have things that need to be a motion and discussion, stuff like that, let's use this opportunity to get it on the next agenda. Let's be that our MO, so we're not doing legislation at 9, 10 o'clock at night and everybody's gone. That's the only purpose of that. If it's something that's super pressing, then we'll do it if we have to. But I'd sure like for just, if you have a great concern that we really do need to legislate, that use this opportunity to officially get it put on our next meeting. Mr. Braden.
I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Ms. Ramswell.
Thanks, Mayor. So I wanted to bring forth an idea for future consideration, and it's something that we would have to share with the Mid-Bay Bridge Authority. Parker, I'm not sure if you're still on that board or not, but
yeah, I am.
A citizen actually mentioned something that I'd thought about, but she actually sent it to me in an email, and that being that on turnover days, the left turn lane, or the left-hand lane, is usually the one that's the Sun Pass and you go straight through. And she said, well, why don't they open that up further back because often it's clear, you just have to wait an hour just to get up there to get to it. So if you could perhaps, Parker, or however we need to do this for future, see about lengthening that lane and moving those cones so that they curve and that SunPass lane is longer.
The easiest thing is if they would make SunPass the right one instead of that little one over on the edge. That would be
or something. But yeah, I think, yeah.
There you, let's not even get into that discussion. I've already butted heads with the chairman multiple times, and I'll speak with our sitting member on the
That's
Mid-Bay
right,
Bridge.
it's not fair. Jimmy was here earlier, and
Yeah, he's gone
but
now.
he's gone now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but anyways, there's definitely some issues that need to be resolved, and maybe we'll have a chat. Yeah. Yeah,
But that
technically.
left one is dedicated SunPass,
Yeah,
right?
but
And
there's
so
no
that's
signage.
the-
There's
yeah.
no signage. That's the bad part. Nope. That is really something we ought to actually put on as an agenda item to come up with a recommendation to that board from our city. What do you think about that, Parker?
It might be more constructive if we invited the executive director of the Mid-Bay Bridge to come here so we could have a live discussion with him rather than sending letters back and forth. It's so much better to have folks I know Van Fuller would probably be happy to come and talk with us about some of those issues and some of the challenges that this isn't the first time, you guys have addressed, well, why don't they switch it to all SunPass? Why don't they just go to toll by plate? Why don't they extend this? There are extenuating circumstances why we haven't done those certain things yet. The problem with if you make the entire bridge system toll by plate, there is a problem with people paying their bills. When you have toll booths, you actually have to get their money. Toll by plate has a non-payment rate that's almost 30%. So you would lose out on a tremendous amount of revenue if you switched. There's a whole bunch of those things, and I think if Van was here, it would be much easier for us to have that sort of cohesive discussion.
Yeah, my argument is if you had toll by plate, you could put 50% more people through it, so you'd still be up 20%. Jimmy didn't buy that, by the way. But anyways, Lance, if you would, let's put that on as an agenda item, extend that invitation, and maybe he could educate us on the challenges facing them, and then we'll barrage him with our wonderful ideas that we think will help improve the situation. Okay?
I'll reach out.
Ms. Ramswell, anything else?
Mayor.
All right, Mr. Dixon.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to apologize to you about earlier. I got mad, and the reason I got mad, and let me tell you why, is because we had an attorney come up here that was basically part of the lawsuit that we had just voted to settle. And basically, this attorney, I think he represents governmental entities as well, basically told us that we had done something wrong or illegal by exercising our right to go into executive session to discuss pending lawsuits or lawsuits that have been filed, not pending, but lawsuits have been filed. And to make the assertion that we should do that in public is almost ridiculous. I mean, it is, in my opinion, I don't know what the person was thinking. And so, but it's kind of like being called communist and somebody walk out of the room. It's kind of the same thing where if a person comes up to the podium and if, in my opinion, they've said something that's totally off the wall and totally incorrect, I feel it my responsibility as a council member to try to correct that. And I apologize, I got out of place, and I know I did, but I can't take the fact that we've been dealing with this thing for maybe 2 years longer, something like that, and then we get stuff like that.
Apology accepted, first and foremost.
And anyway, I try not to get mad like that, but whenever things like that happen, it's just, I can't help it, but I apologize.
I appreciate that, sir, and it's accepted. My intent there was not to silence you or quiet you. I saw that was not going to go anywhere, and he had said his piece, and I was hoping that he was done and he would walk away from the podium. And I'll be more tactful on how I do that next time, so that won't happen.
Well, and when, you know, they can't just walk up there and say what they want to and just walk away. That's just not cool. We have to be able to reply to it.
Well,
And so,
unfortunately, they can.
well,
they
can.
probably will.
they can, but it's not cool to understand. Okay. My next thing is that we are, in my opinion, well, not my opinion, in everybody's opinion that's talked to me about it, we are accumulating a lot of derelict boats again. The boats are showing up in Joe's Bayou. They're right next to our boat launch. I think we need to get on another round of boat cleanups. I did get a call. There's one that was in the Marlar Bayou that drifted out of Marlar Bayou and is now fixing to be running up against people's docks. And so it's time for another boat roundup. And so please, let's do whatever we need to do to get that junk out of the water before we have a hurricane and that stuff is in somebody's living room.
Tuffy, I will agree with you 100%. I think the way we got rid of them a lot last time was the fact that we ponied up the cash for FWC to follow their own procedures, because they're always complaining that we've got the rules in place to deal with derelict vessels. Not all of them will meet the qualifications. We have to give notice to the owners. It's a lot of burden upon the FWC, and as an organization, I don't believe they had the money to be able to hunt down each one of our boats. However, I believe the deal that we struck several years ago was that we said, listen, if we help pay your costs to go follow through to do this, let's work hand in hand. We'll cough up the cash for the resources that you need. I'll support you on that. I don't, you know, it's clear that we've got a big problem with
My
that.
understanding that in the boat, when you buy a boat vessel registration, that there's a portion of that money that goes into a fund that the state helps us offset the cost of getting rid of those derelict vessels. And I think that's kind of...
It does exist.
Yeah.
You're correct.
So let's just see what we can do about getting them gone. I do know that there's some showing up in the bayou there, and if we don't get them, they'll stay there forever and sink, and it'll be a bigger problem. So
yes, and just to prepare you, that fund does exist. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, South Florida has rated it. Basically, they've got a problem with this that is basically 10 times worse than us. The keys are out of control. There's just not enough money collected to go after every single boat. So I'm just want to prepare you. We're probably going to have to foot the bill, but I support you. And if it comes down to it that we need to foot the bill to get these things out of here, I'm your guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, and one of the things too is you got state statutes that are involved with here. You got maritime law that's outside even the U.S. Coast Guard's jurisdiction. It's a real pain in the butt to get rid of derelict vessels. So it's just arduous. And Lance, get on it.
We're on it. The two in Joe's Bayou are already in the queue. They're working through the process.
All right.
If we can get the owner to sign over the titles, that's what we did on those other boats. Then we can have our staff take them out.
Cool. All right, Mr. Oberdeer. He's good.
Okay.
You're up.
I just have a concern, and this can be brought up at future council meetings. In our charter, the way that the city manager is dealt with has always been we have the right to hire and fire at will without cause. Having been the senior council member up here as many years and gone through 5 city managers, I just like y'all to think and consider about a different way to do the city manager. The reason I say this is, after a while, some of the city managers are going to find out it's self-preservation. Please, the 4 members that you know will vote you in or out. And that bothers me more than anything else, because I think sometimes we're not getting the right mix for the city manager because of the past problems we've had with city managers. We have always been over various issues. I know we did a charter review not long ago and nobody decided to change anything, but we could. Yeah, you're right, Ms. Rimswell. I stand corrected on that. But I think we need to look at redoing the charters versus the city manager and the city attorney, the ones that we can hire and fire at will, because I think self-preservation is what's going to happen, and I think that's possibly what we're going to be facing in some of our next ones. And so anyway, y'all consider that, and if we need to bring it back on the agenda, then we'll do it. But y'all think about it for a while.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Are you saying that basically that we would not then have the authority to terminate the city
No,
manager?
I'm not saying that. We need to restructure how it's worked out. We can still have the authority, but what it is basically, if you read the charter, all you need is a majority vote to hire and fire at will with no explanations or anything whatsoever. That's the way several of our city managers have been let go in the past. And after a while, you're going to get city managers who are going to figure out who those four are, and no matter what.
That's every city in the world. Go ahead.
Well, no, not every city has the same kind of charter we have. The way our charter is written, you can go back and look at various city charters. I'm just putting this out for y'all to think about, that we might need to look at how the city manager is hired and fired, and along with the city attorneys, because I've been through a lot of this, and in my going on 15th year now, so I know how it works. The only other thing I have is the kudos. The kudos are for the employee picnic that was this past Friday. It was very good. The burgers were okay, even though our IT guy was the one doing most of the flipping. They did lose a hot dog or two in the grill.
He didn't burn any.
No, he didn't burn any, but there was a hot dog or two missed in the grill, it was very, very good. And the last thing I have is after that I attended the official swearing-in ceremony of Judge Maney's replacement, Angela Mason, who just happens to be a member of one of the founding families, the Marlers. And she is now accepted. She is now a full-fledged judge, taking the position again of Judge Maney, who I've had the privilege of having sworn me in all 4 times I've been up on council. So now that we have a sort of a Destin night in the mix now, it's good to have a judge that is in the family, so to speak. And that's all I have tonight.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Destin.
Nothing, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Morgan.
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. Myself, I just want to comment on the city charter. There's no harm in doing a city charter review, but as it presently stands, to hire a city manager, it takes a majority vote. It's a 5-2 vote. It's not just 4-3 or what have you. So I think that was already designed that way.
Yeah, it's 4-3. There's a specific provision with supermajorities, but it's not dealing with that. I promise you.
All right.
I've been around for firing 2 of them already.
I think it's a hire,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yep.
Hiring, not firing.
Yeah, well, maybe we could make it 5-2 to fire them too. I don't know.
Well, let's just continue this thought until the next meeting.
I'll figure that one out.
Well, that's what he asked, was to talk about it next meeting.
And then we'll come back and put it on the agenda sometime.
Ah, you're right. To hire one, it's super majority. All right. Kim, it's your turn. And you have something to actually talk about.
I do. Well, first of all, it's a 70% vote for the city manager in the charter. But moving on to my actual item, I am requesting council consensus to invoke the pending ordinance doctrine in recognition that myself and staff are going to be and have been working on an ordinance amending the LDC to allow the city council to add a 4th category to the vested rights ordinance you already passed. It would be a very limited category, dealing with only minor developments, and as it's currently written and included in the agenda packet, it's for structures of 3,000 feet and structures that are not within the MMTD, although we are going to recommend actually taking out the part about the MMTD because it's too over-encompassing. It covers almost all of the city. But at this point, we are just looking for you to make that consensus that there is a pending ordinance going on to establish that category.
Mr. Braden.
Before I give you my thought on that, where are we at with the vehicles on the beach ordinance?
It is going to LPA on Thursday.
Thank you.
Mr. Marler.
You have my blessing on the other.
Ms. Kopp, as you recall, I asked for the list of all the development orders in the pipeline and
yes,
what
you
reasons.
Did. You did ask Mr. Schmidt for that, and I understand, is he still here? Yeah, he's working on it, as I understand it. Are you working on it? Oh, they already have it. I haven't seen it yet myself.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a copy for you.
Okay, good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'd like a copy too, if I can ask.
Just send that out to all of us? Yeah.
Just give it to all of us. Is that all you have, Ms. Kopp? Yes, that was it. All right. Adjourn.